What is up, fellow sickos? I am Dan Favale, joined as always by my certified fantabulous co-host, Mr. Grant Hughes. It's time to get to 2024-2025 NBA record projections slash over-unders. We're going to go through the over-unders of each team's, our picks. We'll talk about how many wins we have them penciled in for. I will throw up a graphic at the end where you can see where Grant and I landed in terms of the standings for each conference. So stay tuned for that. But this is fun because we don't have any like baseline criteria to go through. So I get to go right to the question everyone wants to know the answer to. Grant, how the heck are you doing?
I'm doing very well. I'm happy. I'm excited to discuss the process by which we arrived at such incredibly similar win totals. So we did not discuss this beforehand. You did yours first. I didn't look at yours. And as the listeners and viewers will see, we have some deviation. So that's good. But I can't wait to talk about like how this particular brand of sausage got made. And it's so ridiculously similar.
Right. And so there was, because I was going through it to make the graphics after you did it. So like there's some definitely differentiation when it comes to the actual wins when we went to specific records. Because if those were spot on, we'd have some, that'd be bizarre.
Even those are close though. Like I thought.
Some of them were pretty close, but I will say that the over-unders were going down or up together. Like, because we are so in lockstep with those. Like, if one of us has a bad run at these this year, and I was horrid last year. I was like one of the worst in our competition with our Discord members. I was like third worst.
Did you beat me though?
No.
Oh, okay. I remember doing really poorly too.
I beat two people and one of them were not you. That's a good time to plug. We will be running it again. So we will have, and the winner will get something. I have to talk to Grant about what, but we're going to have our over-under competition. You'll be locked into the same win totals that Grant and I are using today. So go join our Discord if you have not already. The link's in the podcast and YouTube description because I'll be firing that up probably within the next couple days. But yeah, I'm excited to explain how we rationalize this, but I don't know that I don't know how many arguments there are going to be there just because.
Yeah. Well, so before we go to the first team, so here's what I think happened. And you tell me if you had a similar experience. Like, so I definitely over-index on wins because I just went down each team as like, what do I think its record is going to be? And I looked at like how they do last year. What was the point differential last year? What's changed? Just like the basics. Like, are we going up? Are we going down? To what extent? And then I get done and I'm like plus 60 something in wins. And so I got to start peeling wins off of someplace. And I think what I did was just like, you know, 2 here, 2 there, 2 here, 2 there. And it made the records that I projected like really condensed toward the middle. Like I wasn't pulling that much from the really high win teams or the low win teams. It's just like, I feel like I have a million teams between 49 and 44 wins because I just kept like, well, thinking like, it's going to just regress towards the middle from both ends. And that's how I ended up so close to you. Was that your process too? Is that how you like, because we did say that you were over in wins too and then had to adjust down.
Yeah, I was not over by 60. I think my first run through was, and I've done the over-unders with our look-ahead guests. So like I wasn't looking at them while I did them, but in my mind, I'm sure I subconsciously had them while I was going through. What I ended up having to do was though, I think I don't, and these will be the fan bases that get the angriest, which I think is fine. I'm not actively trying to piss anyone off by doing this. I ended up having to pull wins from, if I had a team that ended up with 37, I need a good argument as to why, because look at the draft that's coming up.
Yeah.
Look at how competitive the top of these conferences are. And like, those are the teams I started pulling wins from because some of them are just like, well, they are sort of like, this is not a team I actually took a bunch of wins from, but like Portland, it's just like, if you're going to pencil them in for 35 wins, it doesn't make sense. Like they have the talent. We talk about like Portland's weirdly stacked, but there's no incentive for them to, I know they don't necessarily need more picks, but like just winning 35 games and that doesn't even get you to the play-in in the Western Conference. Like those were the teams that I was like, you know what? If they're around this territory by the trade deadline, like this is their pace. These are the teams that are going to shut people down. Okay. They're going to trade people. And so that's where I started pulling wins from.
Yeah.
I will say the hardest thing for me to do was the two things that were the hardest thing was the new additions, especially when it came to the Knicks and Timberwolves, which are two teams I'm very high on. It's, well, how long does this take to come together? Like the whole team, they were just slapped together, but it's like it happened as training camps were beginning. So it's going to take a little while for this to coalesce. And then the even bigger one was just the West is a beast.
Yeah.
And I wasn't even comfortable taking wins from like the Jazz or the Blazers is where we're at. But like independent of them, it starts with the Spurs, the Rockets, the Grizzlies, like there's just so many could be good teams in the West. And it makes me wonder who is going to be the team in the West that's like, we're just going to have missed on because they decided like, no, we're pulling the ripcord on here. We don't want to be 43 wins.
Right. Well, I mean, I don't know if they're pulling the ripcord, but there is definitely a Western Conference team that we both went pretty low on that was a 50-win team last year, I think, or close to it. But anyway, we should start. I think it's just interesting that I don't know. I think we both were too optimistic, I guess, which is maybe like, hey, good for us initially. And then we really had to throttle back on a lot of these teams. So you want to start with the Atlanta Hawks?
Yes, let's do it. Let's do it. Let's follow the alphabet again,
All
Grant.
right.
Let's see how we do at it. So the Hawks have an over-under, Grant, of 35.5. Are you going over or under here? And so why? Or if you want to go through your process first before you get to a verdict.
Yeah. And I just spoiled it. Well, so initially I had them at like 39, I think, just because I know DeJounte Murray's gone, but it's like Trae Young, maybe he's healthier. If the Jalen Johnson leap happens, like there's another path towards more wins. They don't own their picks. Like that's a huge factor. So unless you're trading Trae Young to San Antonio for those picks back, like a tank doesn't seem super likely. Although we have discussed, like, you know, if you can't get your own, at least get somebody else's. You're not like, you can't, it's not like you cannot trade Trae Young because you can't get those picks back. Like that's still possible. But this was a team that I knocked like 3 wins off of. So I'm over, but by the slimmest margin possible at 36 wins. And it's just, they're just not as good as the definite playoff teams in the East. And they're also just not, they're in the middle. This is an in the middle team right now, unless something dramatic happens.
I also had them at 36 wins. I actually had them higher at first. They were one of the teams that I had to pull stuff away from. And as you mentioned, this is not going to be a team that theoretically will have a sell-off unless the Godfather offer for Trae Young comes into play. But at the same time, in the back of my head, I'm like, they're going to be relying on a bunch of unfinished products or unproven guys. Zachary Risachet for one, but also Dyson Daniels. It seems like they valued him pretty highly in the DeJounte Murray trade. And so unless you are we going to see more of a transition to Onyeka Okongwu as your primary big, just Jalen Johnson get more responsibility? And maybe there's just always we view it through the lens of just, well, what if they decide to trade Trae Young? If they're not that good, like, do they just try and recoup assets for Bogdanovich? Or can they get something for Onyeka Okongwu or DeAndre Hunter? I've even bandied about, this is just really not related to anything, but if you were the Spurs, would you give back one or more of Atlanta's picks if you could get Jalen Johnson? Let's say he doesn't sign an extension.
Yeah. Wouldn't you?
You would?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I would too. I just want to make sure I wasn't the only one because he's about to start his next deal and he's not like super great defensively, but it's to plug him next to Wemby in the front court makes so much more sense than doing so with a Keldon Johnson or a Jeremy Sohan.
Would you agree that this is unless the sell-off happens, this team has a pretty high floor. Like they're not going to win if guys are healthy and they don't trade away a bunch of, the Trae Young or they don't trade Jalen Johnson or whatever. Like it's hard for them to be much worse than this. And I do think like maybe Trae Young's healthy and is much better. Johnson makes leap. There's like 45, 46 win upside here. I don't think it's like reasonable to make that the expectation.
Right. I had them. So when I first did it, I had them at 43 and it was just, you can talk me into getting there, but as a prediction, I'm just there's at least like 7 other teams in the East that I think that are just substantially better than the Hawks. But maybe this turns out, what Vic Krejci did last year was for real and it scales into a bigger role. Maybe Kobe Buffkin's able to log actual minutes this year and he's really good. I know that people talk a lot about, well, like, what are they going to do at center? But like they have Jalen Johnson, Clint Capella, Larry Nance Jr., and Onyeka Okongwu, one of the better just 4-man, like 4-5 rotations in the league. So if Trae Young's healthy, the final thing I'll say before we move on, just to square with, well, how big of a role is Zachary Risachet going to play? I know that he probably won't be central to the on-ball offense, but if you're going to rely a ton on a rookie, it gets you into iffy territory, right? Like he might have to be their primary wing checker in their core lineups, and that as a rookie is a tough thing to do.
Yeah, for sure.
We're on to the Boston Celtics, which I don't know, and maybe I'll do the intro for the East teams and you can take the West ones, but
Sure.
their over under is 57.5, which they won 64 last year and made no material changes. So I'm curious as to how you gamed this one out.
Yeah, a few factors. Again, yet another team I had to start peeling a couple wins off of because I had them higher initially. I think Porzingis' absence is a factor, as is the related issue of when he is back. I do think he's like a second night of a back-to-back, planned rest guy. I think they might limit his minutes. And really, I think that's an approach they might take with everybody, just because the run to the finals is long. Several guys were with Team USA, so they didn't get a huge summer break. Like, I think some real careful management of the roster at the top end of it anyway is like very likely and probably like should be what they do. The championship hangover, like all those like additional like wishy-washy factors I think are there. And when you're dealing with a team that won 64 games, like you got to come down. Like, I mean, I would assume, right? So I have them under. I have them at 56 wins. And like that's still for me the best in the East, not to spoil the rest of it, but it's definitely like that's a lot of come down from 64. And it's not an argument that Boston is like, oh, they're worse. It's just I think that's just the way they're going to manage the season.
I'm with everything you said. The only thing I would add, and so I went under as well. I have them at 57 wins, so I'm right there. It wouldn't shock me if they had another 60-something win season. And it's the Porzingis injury is big. And then I know you could say, well, look at how well they performed without him, including during the postseason last year. You now have to do that until what? January at least.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing is Al Horford's getting older. And then it's all right, you can plug in Xavier Tillman and Luke Cornett and Neemias Queta. But like, can you play two bigs anymore together when you look at the current setup? Like maybe, but are you going to get away with it for as much? Then what does that do? Does it put any other undue strain on your perimeter players? With all of that said, I'm very open to the idea that just like Jason Tatum was at the Olympics, didn't necessarily play the ton. Is he going to want to have sort of a revenge campaign for people who didn't think that he belonged in the MVP discussion? Jaylen Brown, does he kind of have a chip on his shoulder because he wasn't selected to go to Team USA? I understand that we can't necessarily quantify these things, but as I think it was Jaylen Brown even said this, the goal wasn't just to win one. And so it wouldn't shock me if, let's just say they're not at full strength. Maybe they are managing their minutes and they're still just head and shoulders better than everyone in the Eastern Conference and win 60 games again. I think that's a play.
Yeah. I don't think teams like think this way necessarily, or at least explicitly, but it's like they can look at each other and say like, we don't need 64, like to be the number one seed. Like odds are historically, like, that's a ridiculous win total. It doesn't happen often. 59 might do it. And, once like 56, I'm saying 56, 57 is plenty to win the East. So like, I do think that little bit of knowledge. Now, I don't know if that changes if like some of these other East teams we're pretty high on, like get off to crazy starts and maybe Boston actually cares about the one seed, but like this is just what happens. I think after a championship, it would be my guess, given in addition to their specific like injury and health and age circumstances.
If I told you they were just determined to go for it during the regular season, would you just smash the over?
Oh yeah. I mean, I think 60 is like totally doable, even with the Porzingis stuff, if they really cared.
This team that's coming up is not going to win 60 games. I can tell you that much right now. They might lose 60 though, if not more. The Brooklyn Nets, over under of 18.5, Mr. Hughes, which I think is the second lowest over under projection from that we're using FanDuel for this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had them over initially, and then again had to peel some wins off. I had them at 19. It's just like this is a little bit. Portland is a more extreme case. We discussed them already. As like there's actually a lot of good veteran talent here. Brooklyn's not in that boat, but you could just look at it and say like, well, until guys get traded, like Dennis Schroeder, probably a very low end starter, but like is an NBA veteran who's been capable on playoff teams before. Cam Thomas, Dorian Finney-Smith, Cam Johnson, Nick Claxton. We like Noah Clowney. Like, I'm not going to say Ben Simmons, but Ben Simmons, like maybe there's something there. You could, if they wanted to go for it, this team could win in the mid-20s, maybe. Like, that's not totally ridiculous, but that's a low bar. But I did go under. I ended up with 17 here. And it's just, you got to pull the wins from somewhere. And like, this is a Nets team that is firmly in a rebuild. And if there's any lever they can pull to make sure they have a bottom 3-4 record, I think they'll pull it.
I went under as well. I have them at 15 wins. They have a finite window in which they can be as bad as possible. They have no cornerstone on their team. Nick Claxton or Cam Thomas is probably the closest they come. If Cooper flag odds are at stake, I know it's all about, well, you only need a bottom 4 record to have those odds, or they're flattened enough to where if you finish with the 5th or 6th worst record, it's fine. This team, one, doesn't have the talent to do that. Like, who's driving this offense? I don't want to hear any more about Ben Simmons until he gets out there and does the thing.
Yeah.
Cam Thomas is good. Is he a good enough passer? I have no idea. So this team, I think, is going to be bad on purpose. And the other part, like, even if they don't make trades, and I would expect that multiples from when we're talking Cam Johnson, Cam Thomas, Dorian Finney-Smith, Dennis Schroeder, maybe Ben Simmons, Nick Claxton. If you're going to set the over, I just named 6 guys. If you're going to set the over under 2.5 of those guys being traded, I'm taking the over. And even if they're not, this team is shutting people down after the All-Star break. Nick Claxton got paid. They're not going to flinch at doing that if he's still on the roster past the trade deadline.
Yeah, I think that's right. It's just, they're going to be bad and maybe the worst team in the East. It's just a question of like, how low do they really think they got to go?
I would actually argue they're doing themselves a disservice if they went to the trouble of acquiring their own draft picks and they don't have one of the 3 worst records in the league.
Yeah, like, what's the Oprah thing? Like, when someone tells you who they are, believe them. It's like the Nets just told us who they were. They got their picks back for a reason. That's what's going to happen.
This next team, the Charlotte Hornets, over under of 29.5 grand. I will say before you get started, I understand the logic now when I sat here and thought more critically about it, why the over-under is so low. This almost just seems like a classic case of they're assuming nobody's going to be healthy, which whatever's going on with Mark Williams might be a good assumption, or that people are getting traded. And because I like this team on paper when they're at full strength, which is my initial inclination was, oh, this is low. And I started to think through it a little bit more. I was like, I get to why you would be this low, if not lower, on Charlotte.
I agree. I get it too. This is a pessimistic over-under number. This 29.5, I think. I was way higher. I look, if you made a really compelling case that the Hornets over-under should be like 37.5, I'd be like, I get it. Because it's LaMelo Ball. Maybe he's an all-star again. Last time he was healthy, he was.
Maybe he's an all-NBA player. Like,
maybe he's an all-NBA player. Right. Maybe Brandon Miller, second-year jump. Like, Miles Bridges is a good NBA player. Like, that's just that full discussion over. Like, the Mark Williams injury is a great, here we go again. Like, how much there's a lot of reasons to be doubtful, but man, like, I think this might be there's quite a bit of range here. I think that you could envision. I did go over by the narrowest margin possible. I have them at 30 wins. I really, really could be talked into like 7 or 8 more if someone wanted to make the case. Like, if you think Charlotte is like they're a play-in team, no question. Like, I'm receptive to that. I don't think they're a team that's going to go. What did they win? Like low 20s last year? I can't even remember now. 21.
Yeah, they won 21
with a point differential of a 17-win team, by the way. So like we're projecting massive growth in Charlotte this season. But yeah, is that how you feel? Like, there's just like the range is pretty big here.
Yes, when I first went through, I had them at 38.
There you go.
I ripped wins away from them. They're still over, but I have them at 30 because there's the health factor for sure with LaMelo, and we know about Mark Williams, but this team is still, I understand that on paper they could be good, but if they have the chance to win 38 games, it's probably because Miles Bridges is playing well, Cody Martin is healthy and playing well. Why are those guys still on the team when you're looking at the trajectory of this franchise and everything they've prioritized since the new regime took over has been bigger picture? And so I'm not trying to, this is like kind of a backhanded compliment, but I don't think they're going to be comfortable with being on a 37, 38 win track. Like Michael Jordan would have been. I don't think that this group is going to be. And so, and like, honestly, winning 38 games might've been the goal just to like make the play in. And I don't think they're going to get caught up in that. Now, maybe if they're so much better than expected, they might view it as like, well, we have our 2 guys in LaMelo and Brandon Miller. But honestly, I even feel like, are we just going to rule out that LaMelo's a trade candidate here? I wouldn't go into the season as Charlotte aiming to do this, but if he's healthy, playing exceptionally well, and if Orlando comes in with just a massive offer, you're early enough into your rebuild that it's, oh, okay. Even if LaMelo's healthy though, and you're not trading him, are we sure he's going to play a ton after the All-Star break? I guess if All NBA is on the line and that's what, like, and he's in the discussion, sure, you have to. But I think that this is a team that has bigger aspirations than just winning 37, 38 games. And unless that they're decidedly above 500, I don't think they'll lean into that.
I think their draft pick too, who's, he's in the caboclo zone of like 2 years away from 2 years away. It suggests that like we're cool with like a very long runway here. But I want to ask you, price in like average health. Like we don't need 82 games from LaMelo and Brandon Miller, but you get 70 from each of them, right? And like no tear down trades. If you give me those variables, or if I give you those, I solidify those are no longer variables. They're not selling off and they don't have major injury issues, just like average injury luck. Can this team win fewer than 30 games if those variables are like accounted for?
I guess it depends on like how committed are they to the developmental course.
No shutdowns either. No late season shutdowns.
Well, I mean, so I guess here's my thing this would be the gauge for me. So are we just assuming then? I don't expect Salon to play a bunch before the All-Star break or the trade deadline.
Mm-hmm.
Are you saying like that's they're not going to prioritize? Well, let's see what Brandon Miller can do with even more on-ball offense. Let's see what T-John Salon could do with more playing time. And so if they're going for it and they're healthy, no, I don't see a pathway to this team winning fewer than 30 games. I actually know this is funny. I'm diverging from John Hollinger on this, where he's like, well, look at what they did when they had Terry Rozier and PJ Washington, not last season, but the season before. They still didn't win a bunch of games. I still think that LaMelo Ball is the great equalizer there, to where this guy is transcendent on the offensive end. And if he's healthy, this is a 30+ win team.
Yeah. I think I guess my question is really just like a roundabout way of me saying like the talent here is more than sufficient to be like pushing for a play-in if they want to. And the reason there's so much variance, or like you could talk yourself up or down so much, is like it's unclear at this point like what their priorities are going to be, even though I think you're probably right that like if it comes, and that's reflected in our numbers here, like I think we should have faith that they'll realize that like 26 wins is better than 38 wins for what this organization seems to be going for. But we'll see.
And I will say, as the final thought would be, if you think they're going to be healthy, the only reason to go under here is you think they're actively going to steer out of clearing it. And even that, is there anyone on this team that you, independent of LaMelo, that you could just move or shut down that is going to impact their bottom line when it comes to wins and losses, like to that degree?
Yeah, probably not.
I don't know. Brandon Miller, and that's just a no-go. And maybe Miles Bridges. I don't know how many. If you're telling me LaMelo plays all season and you trade Miles Bridges, I still think this team wins more than 30 games.
Right. Yeah, pretty comfortable over, weirdly, even though we're just barely over. It's just.
Well, I had to rip wins from somebody. I'm trusting that they care about the bigger picture more. I'm not sure if this team cares about the bigger picture. Spoiler alerts there up on screen, but the Chicago Bulls, 27.5. I'll spoil it. It's up there already. We both went under. I don't feel good about this, though. I don't trust that the Bulls are not going to try and win 32 games or something.
This is the problem. Like, because so I had them, like, I'm at 26, so I'm under by, you're quite a bit lower than me at what, 21 is what you have them at?
Yeah, I pulled wins from them, and I'm also just like they have to understand.
Right. Come on, fellas.
Yeah.
That said, I just, in my initial run through, I was like, why can't they win 37 games? Like, why if Zach LaVine, did you see the Zach LaVine opening statement at media day?
No, did you see the image where it looked like him and Nikola Vucevic just found out they were playing for the Chicago Bulls? They looked like they were prisoners, honestly.
So again, it's a little bit like the Charlotte argument where it's like, well, if LaVine stays here, which is like, what are we really talking about? Or they can't possibly not trade LaVine, like if his value tips into positive territory. But then you just go through and it's like, Kobe White's good, Dosunmu's good, maybe Patrick Williams will be like, there's just there's a mid-30s team here, even without DeRozan and Alex Caruso, but they just can't do it. Like they gotta be, they have to realize what the assignment is, I think.
I think they look, you have that pick too that's owed to San Antonio. You don't want to chance it. It's top 10 protected.
Top 10.
You have to suck.
Mm-hmm.
You have to suck. And the means by which you do that, I think any team that's planning on having Josh Giddey run the show, who, by the way, Josh Giddey's injured. So, I mean, that's going to throw a wrench. So now you're just going to integrate him on the fly. And the other thing too is I wouldn't say I trust them to steer out of winning too many games, but like, if Patrick Williams, Kobe White, Zach LaVine, and Ayo Dosunmu are all still on this roster past the trade deadline, I'll be sufficiently flabbergasted.
This is a team that is in position to a year from now be at like absolute zero, right? Like if LaVine gone for picks and whatever, Kobe White gone, Dosunmu gone, and then it's just like Josh Giddey, assuming they extend him, and that's it. Vucevic somehow gone. Also, I don't know how you trade him.
By the way, this could become dated, but we're getting close enough where there's only a couple weeks left before the deadline. If you're not going to extend Josh Giddey, you need to re-justify that trade. First of all, I'm not saying that I'm going to like the number they extend him at, but you already valued him as, he was worth Alex Caruso on his own. And that, by the way, that's the other thing here. Throw the whole, are the Bulls going to twist themselves into losing enough games? You just traded lost two of your three best players because you had Kobe White, DeRozan, and Caruso. Those were the Chicago Bulls because Zach LaVine was injured, wasn't playing really well when he tried to fight through it. Those were two of your three best players, and they're now gone. And you replace them with Josh Giddey. That's not enough to offset. And that's a team. So the Bulls last year win 39 games. So going from DeMar DeRozan and Alex Caruso to Josh Giddey, I'm not saying that's going to cost you 14 wins necessarily, but it's a pretty damn good start.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Even if they don't steer into the skid, they've definitely, I don't know, the car's out of control, or hopefully it is in this case, to butcher an analogy.
Our next team, the Cleveland Cavaliers, come in at 48.5 wins, Mr. Hughes. You are a big advocate that they should trade everybody and rebuild around Greg Porter Jr., so I'm curious where you land on this.
Yeah. This team, I think, has a really good chance of blowing this number out of the water. I don't know. It's partly the stability. It's partly the coaching change. I think, we did a little bit of discussion about Kenny Atkinson and what he might do for Evan Mobley, and based on what he's did for Brook Lopez in the past. I think just this team's top four is better than it was last year when everybody was hurt. Darius Garland's season fell apart when he broke his jaw and lost a bunch of weight because he couldn't eat. Like there's so many easy, there's so much low hanging fruit to pick here, whether it's from a health perspective or like they'll just be deployed more like optimally with a new coach in charge. So this wasn't an easy over for me. And this was yet another one that I peeled off. Like, I think I might've had him at like 56, 57, but I got him at 53 and I still like 48.5. Like they're going to smoke that number. I just think I feel so good about this over.
I hit the over on this too. And I had them and I still might change it. People have to watch and see what the graphics say at the end. When I was going through it, there was at one point where I had them as the number 2 seed in the Eastern Conference. And I still might get there because I really don't know what to do to make sense of the Knicks of it all, where they're trying to integrate so many new pieces and they're fairly shallow. But like, unlike the Sixers and the Knicks, like the Cavs have some continuity now. I know that they have, well, not now, but they did, and they still do. You're adding Kenny Atkinson. That's just different from trying to throw in all these different new rotation players, which they're not going to be tasked with doing. And by the way, last year, everyone just thinks, not that it was a categorical failure, but they were for some reason more pessimistic on the Cavs, who they're missing. Donovan Mitchell doesn't even qualify for the year-end awards. Darius Garland misses a bunch of time and didn't have his best season for a good chunk of it. Evan Mobley misses a bunch of time. They still won 48 games. And so you have to, what is the pathway to them? Like, I'm surprised that the over-under was so low. I don't understand why it wouldn't be higher.
I mean, it's just a bet that the injury stuff continues. I mean, okay, great. Yeah, they won 51 2 years ago. So, like, what are we doing at 48.5? They're worse? Like, why are they worse than that? I don't understand.
I guess you could make the argument the East is better, would be the count.
I mean, but isn't it worse at the bottom? I guess, I don't know. Yeah, even the bottom really just has the two teams that are really horrible. I don't know. I just think 48.5 is like just not high enough. So,
no, if this team, honestly, if they're healthy and they win fewer than 50 games, I don't know what the reason would be.
Right. Because here's the thing too, when like I think we haven't discussed this yet, it'll probably come up again, but like a really, really good defense, which the Cavs are gonna have, just sets your floor. If you're the number 5 defense, like your offense can be league average and you just win 48 games. Like if they're a little better than that, then you're well over 50. You know what I mean? Like the predictability of the defense to me is really like, it just augurs towards like, oh yeah, this win total is going to be in the 50s. I don't know.
I'm with you on that front. Will we be with each other on this front as we talk about the Dallas Mavericks?
All right, so I'll talk about them a little bit here. All right, well, the over-under here, Dan, and you can lead in since I've put a monopoly on that so far. 49.5 is the number for Dallas. What do you got?
I have them over, and I have them quite comfortably. They were a team I ended up needing to pull some wins off of, and when I say that, I mean I still have them at 53. I think they got more dynamic on the offensive end without submarining what they're able to do on defense. And I'm wondering where my disconnect is from people who are, I've seen the argument basically laid out that despite making the NBA finals, the Mavs are further away from a title than expected. If you want, okay, sure. But like, there are people who believe that they got worse. And I just don't like Derrick Jones Jr. couldn't have meant that much to them. I guess you can worry about, well, what does the defense look like during Luka, Clay, Kyrie minutes? There's just easy staggering there. And so I'm wondering if I'm just higher than on, because I think I'm pretty level-headed when it comes to the realities of the Klay Thompson fit, what it does do for them, what it won't do, where it'll hurt them, where it'll help them. The people who think that Klay Thompson is helping your shot creation, that's a no from me, dog. That's not happening. But like, is it just I'm higher on the idea of Najee Marshall and Quentin Grimes then?
I mean, well, I'm with you. I'm over here also, not quite to the degree you are, but this is another case where I like of the top 4 or 5 West teams, I think I peeled off like a couple wins. So I think I was probably in that 53 range you were in before I like knocked down the number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 seeds a little bit to get to where I have them is at 51. I think it's 51, right? Yeah, 51. They won 50 last year. So the argument has to be that the Derrick Jones Jr. loss not only cannot be covered up for by Thompson, Grimes, Marshall, but also that like Derek Lively won't get better. That like Luka might not have like a fraction of a higher gear. Now that's like, you probably don't want to make that your first argument because it's very difficult to be better than Luka was last year. But I think the defense is going to be good. I think the offense is just like on autopilot. There's no way this offense is bad just because of Luka and Kyrie and rolling bigs and shooting. Like what? So pretty, our numbers, yours more so than mine. I'm like what, 1.5 wins over, but like another one like Cleveland where it's like the under hits if Luka gets hurt, basically. Like that's, and I just am not going to think on that.
Which is possible. Maybe Kyrie misses a bunch of time. All right. You're not going to win the title if you don't have Kyrie, sure.
Yeah.
But okay. Like I just had like Luka's just, and the way that he showed that he could play it at variable paces last year, and they're just, I'm trying to, what is this team's biggest weakness? Is it just like, if we're going to get, well, like they really still could use another ball handler. That's fair, but you have Kyrie and Luka. And so it's just like, any third, like you do, and you do have options, by the way. I know Dante Exum is injured and Luka missed some time already, but like you have Spencer Dinwiddie, a veteran on this team. Maybe Jaden Hardy pops. Yeah. And I'm not saying this is the perfect team, but they're deep with real functional depth where it's not, when you talk about some of these teams, it's, well, if this guy that would maybe be a 9th man on most rosters can really be a 6th man or something. It's, I honestly think, and this is probably one of my more condescending takes, is that I don't think people realize how much of a difference both Najee Marshall and Quentin Grimes can make for this team.
Yeah. I think the knock would be, or the concern would just be surrounding like, well, Klay Thompson is helpful in this area, but not this one. And maybe you'd say Najee Marshall is helpful in this area, but not this one. And they don't have that guy that's helpful in every area at that position. It's like, well, neither do 26 other teams. So like, that's just, the flip side of that is that, well, they do have like a historically great shooter to space the floor if they need it. And they do have a guy in Marshall who can guard and bring energy. And they do have Grimes that can. So like, yeah, they don't have a perfect third like wing option, I guess, but they have like 5 guys that can be like value adds in different ways. So yeah, I think the over is it's a pretty good place to be on this one.
Our next team, this is a little bit more tougher for me.
Yeah, this was, I mean,
More
it's so
tougher. Sorry.
it was the most tougherest for me.
Yeah.
The over under is 50.5 for Denver. Well, I'll let you lead here. Why was it harder for you than Dallas, or just tough in general?
It was tough in general. So there are two reasons that it was tough. And it's not the idea that they lost KCP in general. It's that now they're trying to integrate Russell Westbrook, which is always an adventure. And it's you're relying on, you've decided that the crux of your like bench or your non-core guys that are going to prop up like some of those minutes, it needs to be not just Christian Brown, but it has to be Peyton Watson. It has to be Julian Strother. You don't have alternatives. You didn't bring back Justin Holiday. There just aren't alternatives on this roster. There's going to be a shaky situation when it comes to backup five again, I would think. I know Dario Saric is there, but can you play him with Westbrook? There's so many rotation questions I have. And then it's, okay, are Michael Malone and Calvin Booth on the same page? Are they even in the same book? And so if the youngsters aren't coming along as quickly as expected, is there a mandate to continue playing them? Is Michael Malone, even though it seems like they've taken a lot of the alternatives out of his belt, is it, I'm just going to ride with Russell Westbrook over some of these guys because they're not performing up to snuff, and maybe Westbrook has the numbers or just the experience to where you trust him more? And the final thing is, Adam Mares of DNVR Sports, when I was talking to him on our Nuggets look ahead, said that he didn't really think that they were going to hit the over under because of all the mitigating circumstances that we just talked about, and that this is a team that shouldn't really be focusing on it. And I think there'll be some Jamal Murray concern that will creep in. I did eventually settle on over. I think Nikola Jokic is an Iron Man. I think somehow Jamal Murray's become underrated in the sense that everyone's just penciling him like he's going to suck all year. Even if he starts off slow, we've seen how he can close or at least work his way into form. I think the Nuggets will actually probably be better defensively, not because they lost KCP, but I think Christian Brown is better equipped to handle a bunch of defensive assignments. And if you're leaning more on Peyton Watson, I think that's more of a boon for your defense than it's going to be your offense. And so if you're telling me their defense is going to get better and they still just have Nikola Jokic, so the offense is going to be good enough, I struggle to see how this team wins fewer than 50 games unless like there's an injury to like Nikola Jokic or Jamal Murray's really. And honestly, if they lose Jamal Murray, you could probably talk me into the Nuggets still winning 51 games.
That's it for me. I would agree with everything you said. It's just, and I would just add like, by the way, Jokic doesn't get hurt. So I'm over here too. I think we matched at 52 wins for Denver. I still think until proven otherwise, definitively Jokic is the best player in the world. And if he plays his normal amount, like you just can't win fewer than 51 games. Like I don't know what the recipe is for that. Just replace everybody with like league average guys or worse than that. And it's just like, he's just still going to make them great. Like we're not saying they're going to win the conference or they're going to get 60 plus. It's just like 50.5. If you have Jokic, like how do you go below? I don't see how you get fewer than that.
I'm just wondering, and even if the non-Jokic minutes are a disaster again, like we're still seeing them win 50 plus,
which they will be. They will be. That's what they are. But yeah,
I honestly think in realms of what they're trying to do, or if you want to look at it through the lens of losing KCP, I think more than anything, it winds up it could make them a worse postseason team than it is going to impact them during the regular season.
I think that's right.
Very quickly moving on here to the Detroit Pistons, a team that we differ on. 25.5, Grant, which is, look, by the way, that's a really big uptick because they only won 14 last year. I didn't know Tobias Harris was worth 11 victories, basically.
Well, Dan, they had a point differential of an 18-win team. Does that I should just stop saying this because I think it's going to be the case like across the board, but I had them higher before I needed to peel off my 60 plus extra wins. I think they're a little better equipped with shooting with Beasley, Harris, and to support Cade Cunningham, though, like you still probably just need to be spamming, Jaden Ivey, Cade Cunningham minutes and Asar Thompson, Cade Cunningham minutes. Cause we may already have the answer on Ivy, but this is kind of like the make it or break it. Like, are you the guy that we can play beside him? So that's a way you might suppress the win total. I just think there's enough like talent that is young and likely to get better. And also like sensible position of need, skill set of need, veteran help to get over this number. And it's another case where it's like, how many fucking years are we going to just like the Pistons, I think more than almost any other franchise have got to be sick of just these constant lottery seasons, right? So they might be a team that if they're in a position where it's like, we can go for it and maybe get up to 37, 38 wins and sniff the play in, or we shut it all down and we go for another high lottery pick, even with the draft being as highly regarded as it is, I think the Pistons might be the team that would be like, enough's enough. Now, new coach, new management, like maybe for them, it's like, well, we weren't in charge of all the other lottery seasons. We can handle one. So I got them at 29 wins, which is pretty comfortably over. Still obviously not a play-in team, but I believe in Cade Cunningham. I think the young guys will get better. And I think the vets are like, okay, to where this team will be respectable most nights.
So I went under. Is this our first? I think this is the first time we differed on the entire
Furthest
exercise.
apart we've been too, just raw wins.
Yeah, I'm going with 23. I agree with most of your points. I think we're probably at least a year away from the Pistons like deciding they have to win more.
Okay.
And part of that is there is a new regime in place. And maybe it's just, I don't know if I'm not a big enough believer in the young talent they have, but this is still going to be a developmental year. Cade Cunningham should be great. As you already mentioned, they have more access to Cade Cunningham plus shooting, but like you need to get extensive run from Ron Holland, Asar Thompson, Jaden Ivey. I think Asar Thompson can already impact winning in a positive light. That being said, I also think you need to get a ton of information on, well, what do most or all of our core prospects look like together? And there are just so many redundancies when it comes to their weaknesses that I think that's going to undermine the win-loss of it all. Now, if you tell me that JB Bickerstaff has been instructed to coach for victories and that if we're looking at the top 5 leaders in total minutes played or Cade Cunningham and it's Tobias Harris and it's Malik Beasley and Simone Fonte, and that's the route we're going, okay, then sure. But I think even if you're just going to say we need to get a boatload of more information on Jaden Ivey, that's something that unless he just really makes a leap into a positively impactful player, it's not just about him playing well, but can he elevate the play of those around him? Can Jalen Duren get a lot better on the defensive end? It just feels, look, I have them being increased by 9 wins. That's a big enough jump as it is.
Right.
And so that coupled with you have them more than doubling their win total, which is just tough for me to get to. I don't think it's outside the realm of possibility, though, especially if we believe that there are more teams. We know the Wizards and the Nets fall into this, but if you told us that, Chicago is actively going to steer out of what they're doing, ditto for Charlotte, then it gets easier, I think, to inflate the Pistons win total.
Yeah. No, the jump in raw wins is real. It's like that almost never happens. What I'm projecting here. So I think
they're low enough though that it could.
That's the thing. 29. It's like, oh my god, like anyone could win 29 games, right? You would think. It's just when you're coming from 14, that's pretty tough.
And it could be a situation, by the way, where it's like the Spurs last year won 22 games, and you probably weren't happy with a lot of what they did, including playing Jeremy Sohan at point guard, playing Victor Wembanyama next to another big for too long.
Yeah.
But by the end of the season, it seemed like they were you had a ton of information. You knew what you needed. You saw improvements from guys like Victor Wembanyama himself, including Devin Vassell when he was healthy, Trey Jones, that you kind of knew what Jeremy Sohan is. It could be that type of year for the Pistons, except maybe they should be better than that, because I think that there's more veterans on here and there's more higher end prospects that you could hope for improvement from.
I would say last thing, because you just made me think of it, like, I would suspect, assuming good health, that we'll have a pretty good idea of like which direction the Pistons might be leaning towards based on who's actually playing a lot early in the season. Right. So like it might not take very long for us to realize like, oh, Dan was right. Or like, oh, I might be okay here at 29. Because if it's just like, well, Asar Thompson's kind of buried or Jaden Ivey's getting 25 minutes a night, like I think it might be pretty clear early what their sort of objectives are.
If I set the over-under at 0.5 of all of these players being on the roster or being off these players being traded between Jalen Duren, Ron Holland, Asar Thompson, and Jaden Ivey, do you think all 4 of them, basically I'm asking, do you think all 4 of them are going to finish the season in Detroit?
I mean, that goes into like, which way are they going to go? I think I would say of that group, Ivy to me is pretty obviously the most likely to move because you've seen the most of him. I don't know. I'd probably go under just because, like, one, what is Detroit going to get for Jaden Ivey that it would really value? Like, what would someone give up for Ivey? Like, are you like, what team is it that's like, we got to have that guy? Here's something you would want for him, Pistons, as opposed to the Pistons saying, we'll take another year. We could still use restricted free agency. We're definitely not extending him unless it's a total bargain. So I'd probably go under. Would you go over?
I'm tempted to go over just because I really think there's something to the effect of there's a new front office regime in place.
Yeah.
None of these guys, except for Ron Holland, are their guys,
Yeah.
basically. And they made some free agency decisions. They already extended Cade. I think I'm just going to take the over with the caveat that I would view if I were Trajan Langdon, Cade Cunningham and Asar Thompson is just like my untouchables. Like I'm not in
Right.
the market for. But again, that could speak to if someone comes along. If you're a big believer in Ron Holland as the Trajan Langdon led front office, and I don't like who's the best player you could get for Asar Thompson if you're trying to win games. Would you rule it out necessarily? Again, I'm super high on Asar Thompson, so maybe I should probably go under. I'm just going to go over because, like, again, these aren't their guys, and they've
Right.
already extended one of them in Cade Cunningham. And so I think just given the redundancies when it comes to the weaknesses, not necessarily the positions they play or necessarily even their strengths, it just feels like there's some sort of it's not combustibility but turnover potential
Yeah.
here.
That's fair.
Our next team up, Mr. Hughes, is I believe your team to take us through.
Yeah. The Golden State Warriors come in at 43.5 for an over under here. A lot of lineup questions, apparently. That's the big narrative right now. The Jonathan Kuminga extension, the will they, won't they? So with those factors in mind and any others you want to discuss, what are we thinking about the Warriors over under?
I don't feel great about this one. They were one of the toughest team to pegs. I have them at 43 wins. So I have them going under. Unless they're going to make a move, I honestly don't know what the ceiling of this team as currently constructed is, because if let's use Jonathan Kuminga as an example. If Jonathan Kuminga actualizes the best possible version of himself, okay, great. But what does that actually mean for the rest of the roster? Is Andrew Wiggins not playing well or not playing a bunch? Is Jonathan Kuminga actualizing the best version of himself while playing a ton of time next to Wiggins and Draymond Green? Can you even do that? It seems to be that there's still some disconnect within Golden State as to whether they view Kuminga as a 3 or a 4. Draymond Green's pretty steadfast in saying that he's a 3. I don't think that defensively, I feel like he could be. Offensively, I don't know if I see it. So there's just so many questions here. And I like what they did over the offseason by and large. I like a lot of their individual pieces, but the West is a beast. And you have, okay, the Clippers are worse. The Grizzlies should be better if they're healthier. Those two kind of cancel each other out. And so the lay of the land is pretty much the same then. Where are all these extra wins coming from? I know they won 46 last year, but they weren't, even if you like what they did over the offseason, they didn't have one of the most like Sacramento added DeMar DeRozan. Look at what the Timberwolves did on the trade market. Look what the Thunder did in free agency and getting Alex Caruso. They weren't one of the teams that made one of, like, I think if you want to frame it this way, like I think Najee Marshall is probably a bigger swing piece in Dallas than a D'Anthony Melton in Golden State, who I think, to me, D'Anthony Melton's the best player that they added this offseason. So is this all coming down to, you think Draymond Green's going to be more available and that Brandon Podziemski is just it continues to develop, and that's how they're going to win as many or more games? I'm saying that rhetorically. I just, like, Steph is older. I think Steph is still a superstar, but is he a top 5 player or is he a top 15? And yes, there's a big difference.
Yeah. So I've got him over, but at 45 wins, which is one fewer than last year. And so for every scenario you concoct that involves, like, Kuminga makes a leap or something close to it, and Brandon Podziemski is better, and even like Trace Jackson Davis sort of makes it so there's not really a question of who should play center. Like, there's all and the depth really matters. You cannot, like, discuss those possibilities, which maybe that gets you to 48, 49, whatever, without acknowledging, like, this team is drawing, like, look, the injury to the best player argument applies everywhere, but this team in particular is drawing dead, like, every night if Steph doesn't play, because like, unless Kuminga and Podziemski are just suddenly like high-end starter level offensive organizers and score, like, that's just, and I don't know, that doesn't seem likely to me. So Steph's 36. He's never entered a season like since the dynasty like kind of started over a decade ago with like less like proven supplementary offensive help than he has right now. So like the downside is like it's big here. So I think that is reflected in 43.5. Like that feels, that's a pretty low over under for the Warriors are a public team, like not to the Lakers or Knicks extent, but like their numbers tend to be inflated because a lot of people like them. I'm over, but it's like I gotta, but not by a lot. And I'm acknowledging like they have massive downside potential because all the depth in the world and all the organic growth from the youth like just doesn't matter if Draymond, for example, is suspended or regresses and or if Steph misses time. He's 36. He's going to turn 37 before the season's over. Like it's just the lift for those two guys is so heavy that if you go over, which I am, I really don't think you can feel comfortable because the downside is so legit.
And I know they finished 10th in offense last year, but I'm just wondering, like, this isn't just, they lost Klay, but like you did lose Chris Paul. That's an offensive organizer guy. And I guess you're replacing Klay Thompson with Buddy Hield. So that could, let's say functionally, that's at least a wash or close to it. Like they have one creator. It's unless you're trusting Brandon Podziemski to make that leap. Can Jonathan Kuminga do it? Can Kyle Anderson do it? What are the lineups you're using Kyle Anderson in? We've seen him play 5, and I think the Warriors are going to have to use him in that regard. Otherwise, I don't know what you're not going to play him with Draymond Green or Kevon Looney a bunch, I would think. But then you get into, can you even use a front, let's say Kuminga and Kyle Anderson or Draymond Green and Kyle Anderson with quote unquote floor spacers all around them. There's upside here, but I think that as you mentioned, that the real downside, like the potential for the floor to fall out from underneath them feels like it's more likely than for them to hit their ceiling, or there's just more wiggle room for them to hit a bottom most floor than what would be if you told me, I guess this is my best way to frame it as I'm rambling here. They feel more likely to win like 33 or 34 games than they do 50.
I was just going to ask so I think that's the right way to think about it. But I was going to say like, what's the most games you could imagine them winning without a like crazy, I guess we didn't really discuss their like potential interest in a big, like we need another star trade, which is pretty well documented.
Interest? I'm sorry. I really think Mike Dunleavy Jr. put on the performance of the century this past offseason. I mean, I know the Warriors believe they were close to Paul George and he just chose Philly. I'm going to push back and say definitively, I'd be shocked if that was the case. Okay. Well, and so then the Larry Markkinen stuff, they were never close on. Their offer doesn't seem like it, and which is fine if you don't think, but this very much felt as a, look, Steph, we tried. Here's your extension.
It's a little bit of a Danny Ainge playbook where it's like, we were close. We just, like he's done that for years, right? Or at least with Boston, he's kind of taken a different tack. So they don't make a big trade. What's the most games you could realistically imagine them winning? Is 50 kind of your upper cap?
I would probably say 49 is just my cap. I don't know. It's so like even there. So the lineup that if they put their 5 best players on the court, Kuminga, Curry, Wiggins, Pods, Green, they didn't even play 500 possessions together last year, but they had a net rating in the 97th percentile. And now if you're talking about a bench of, D'Anthony Melton is there, and we have Kyle Anderson and Buddy Hield and Moses Moody's still good. I guess just what it comes back to me to square away is, so we're just supposed to believe that Draymond Green and Stephen Curry will both be as available, if not more available, while also as good, if not better than last season, despite entering the phase of their careers where we can't really assume that for anyone who isn't LeBron James.
Right. I would say this team has like a realistic range, because every team like, if the arena catches fire and like, whatever, like there's always this crazy outlandish stuff, but like a realistic range of like 20 wins. Like 33, I could see it, because it's not unrealistic to say guys in their mid to late 30s just fall apart or get hurt and don't play. And I could see 53 if it's like, oh my God, Kuminga is like that guy, and Podziemski is that guy, and Moody and Wiggins is not terrible Wiggins, and they're 53. Sure, I could see it. It's just, this is where I'm just kind of smack in the middle, I guess.
What's the single biggest factor that would lift them to 50 or more wins as currently constructed beyond? Well, let's start here really quickly first. How many games what I need to tell you Steph Curry played in if they won 50 or more next year? 70, right?
At least 70. Yeah.
70. So Steph Curry's playing in 70 games. What is the second single biggest driving factor that would prop or launch them past that 50 win mark?
It's Kuminga and Podziemski becoming like plus starters. Like, you know, they don't need to be all stars, but they have to be guys that we're talking about as all-star can, like, oh, they might make their first all-star game like next, you know what I mean? Like in a year or two. So that they would both have to be like, wasn't it silly that we weren't sure either of them was going to start before the season? Like that kind of thing.
Honestly, the more I talk to you, the more I just want to, I'm becoming higher on the Warriors. And so I feel like we need to move on. I feel like this is what this means.
Don't let me poison you. All right, Dan, another tough West team. There's going to be a lot kind of in this range here. The Houston Rockets, their over under is 43.5 wins. They won, what they win last year? 41 and 41, and even 500 last year. A million young players. Are they all going to get better and smoke this number, or are we going to be conservative here?
I went under, and which just feels so stupid. I have them at 4. To be fair, I do have them at 43. So I didn't go. Oh, did I go over? No. 43 is I read. So 43. I went under. So I'm caking an improvement, and it just feels so stupid. Like because they should be better when you're looking at all these young guys. But I really do think that the minutes distribution of it all and trying to figure out how to make everyone play together, it's not that it can't happen. I just don't think the Rockets are going to prioritize winning as many games as people think that they should. It feels like we're still a season away from them kind of moving on from the developmental aspect
from like the Booker trade or whatever. They're like, that's not this year.
No, and I mean, maybe we're wrong there, but it's just, you could look, Cam Whitmore, Amin Thompson, Alperen Sengun, Jabari Smith Jr., all those guys should be better, but we're also out here sitting, well, are they going to be able to find enough minutes for Reed Shepherd to be in the Rookie of the Year mix? And maybe Reed Shepherd hurts you if you're playing him a ton. I don't know. There is sort of I don't want to say it's fluky, but are we sure that this is going to be a top 7 defense again? I guess if you get better availability from Tari Eason and Amin Thompson, why wouldn't it be? Like, those are two of your most important.
And Shepherd might be a real big plus on defense too, potentially.
And so just like if you have Jabari Smith Jr. and Dylan Brooks is still there and Fred VanVleet, there's no real reason this team should be worse. And that's where I default to, okay, progress isn't linear. The West is going to be just as tough, if not tougher. And I just think their agenda still extends beyond the season that we're talking about. Now, would it surprise me if they traded Jalen Green? No, but I don't know that they're going to. If they trade Jalen Green, I'm still not sure that it's going to be as part of a consolidation trade right now. It might just be for picks because we want to consolidate our rotation. So, and it's just, I have to believe that they're also going to want to experiment with certain things. What does it look like when Reed Shepherd runs the offense? What does it look like when Amin Thompson's on ball more? And they do, look, I know people don't like to talk about this. It could work, but you need to figure out the Amin Thompson, Alperen Sengun fit on the offensive end. If you want Amin Thompson off the ball, okay, like how much does hanging out in the dunker spot work for you? Can he do more as a screener for Alperen Sengun? Can he expand his, he's not going to shoot threes, but can he hit more of his floaters, like dribble out of they're going to give him space behind the 3-point line off the catch. He's going to dribble into a floater or mid-range jumper. I think I have more. Do you have more questions about this team on offense or defense? This team is the constant. They are stacked. If you told me they obliterated the over, I probably wouldn't be surprised, but I just think we're a season away from them trying to be caps lock good.
So yeah, a couple of things. I'm annoyed that you mentioned the progress isn't linear angle, because that was my main justification for being under. I'm also at 43 wins, which is appropriate because you and I are wearing the same uniform today. So we have to have the same picks. So I think like it's so easy to look at all the young talent and say, well, they're all just going to be better. And like, that's the counter to that is like, well, not necessarily, because progress isn't linear. I think to expand on that, it's not like, even if all of them do get better, I do think we're not considering enough, like a leap from one guy sort of has to come at the expense of somebody else, because you can't just play all 8 of these young guys at the same time to get, like, you know what I mean? So like, okay, Amin Thompson's awesome. Like, he has to be on the floor. all right, so maybe Jabari Smith Jr. like plays less or his role is diminished, or, Reed Shepherd's unbelievable. Well, maybe Jalen Green doesn't play as much. So like there's a little give and take. So it can be true that all these guys do organically grow, but it's not necessarily the case that they can all have these massive impacts just because it's a numbers game. There's a finite number of minutes available. Like that's part of it. The West being better is another factor. And I would all, and the scariest part is their point differential was that of a 46 win team last year. So like maybe that is just the baseline we should have been working from. I would like to close by saying we both are saying that the Rockets will be better than they were last year. We're just going under. That's all.
And by the way, it wouldn't shock me if they win fewer games than they did.
Totally possible.
We are on to then the Indiana Pacers. They're over under set at 47.5 after they won 47 last year. This team's fascinating. Where did you end up with them, Grant?
So I hate that I ended up with an identical win total as last year because everything points to them being better than that, right? Like Tyrese Halliburton wasn't the same guy after the early January hamstring. Pascal Siakam will be on the team all year. Maybe you get some more growth from Nembhard, who was better in the playoffs than during the regular season. We aren't banking on this, but maybe Mathurin and Walker both take steps to being more, bigger contributors to winning. So I am under. I'm saying 47, which is the same total as last year. And really that just has more to do with, I think the Cavs are better. I think the Sixers are better. I think the Knicks are better. I think some of the 6, 7, 8, 9 range teams in the East are going to be a little better. And that's going to just kind of offset a potentially better Pacers team and take a couple wins away from, I think I started at 49 because that felt like the right number. And then I just kind of had to peel a couple off to drop down.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. And this team is, if we're being honest, how deep do they go of players you trust? Is it 6, 7? I think so it comes down to, I think it's probably 6, right? So you have Tyrese Halliburton, Andrew Nembhard, Pascal Siakam, Turner. I would throw TJ McConnell and Aaron Nesmith in there. And then it's just, okay, what is Benedict Mathurin? What is Jarris Walker? Obi Toppin was good last year, but what is he in the context of a team that's maybe trying to be better defensively this year? By the way, I went over though. I still have them winning 48 games. Just, okay, Halliburton won't get injured. A full year of Pascal Siakam. I think wins in the middle of the East could be harder to come by this season. It wouldn't shock me if they won 50 plus. There's a clear pathway there. And I think they have at least a core lineup they have core lineups that could be good defensively. I still worry if Jarris Walker isn't exactly what you're missing on the defensive end. I don't know what this team's defensive ceiling is currently constructed, because last year they were in close to the bottom 5. Again, they were 24th in points allowed per possession. You could tell me they'll be better, but how much better realistically can they be on the defensive end this year? And that's all right, you could say that they're going to offset it on offense, but they were number 2 on offense last year. There's not
right.
They can't go anywhere but down basically at this point. So, but I think enough if you think that Tyrese Halliburton and Pascal Siakam are going to be there. And those are 2 guys where there's no reason to just say, oh, they're probably only going to play in 50 games or something. So I think they'll be a hair better, which is why I went over. I had a tough time talking myself into them being much better than 48 wins though.
This is one of the first teams we've had where the range feels kind of narrow. I think the 44 to 51 is kind of where we're at. And we just talked about the Warriors that have a 20 win range potentially.
Yeah. And there's just the Benedict Mathurin and Jarris Walker of it all is fascinating, because it's all right. Will they be playing a ton? And if they are, is it because they're playing well and impacting winning? Or is it because they just don't have, when it comes to Mathurin, I think the Pacers have a ton of other options, but you have this equity invested in him. And it's with Jarris Walker specifically, he feels kind of essential. His development feels essential to them now based off what they did over the offseason.
Yeah. He's the way that they broaden their range, right? If he's that guy, then, 54, it's something crazy. And I don't think that's happening this year, if ever.
Right. I'll be with you there. Next team up, Grant, is your Los Angeles Clippers.
Dan, this is a 38.5 over under for a team that won 51 last year. They have Kawhi Leonard. They have James Harden.
Do
They have a
they?
bunch.
Do they
They
have
have a
Kawhi
bunch of
Leonard?
guys that Kawhi Leonard said have not stood out at camp. That was fun when he said that. I don't think that's
Did you
quite how he
watch the
meant it,
full
but that's pretty
video
funny.
of that?
What's that?
Did you watch the full video of those
No, I
comments?
assume it was like grossly taken out of context.
No, it
Oh,
wasn't.
really?
That's the problem. And so he kind of went through he named them all by name, and he wasn't saying they sucked individually by name, but he mentioned all of them by name, saying like, yeah, obviously we have these guys on the roster, but no, nobody stood out. Is what it
Wow.
was. Just like, it was probably unintentionally funny, but it was hysterical. It's just like, oh, all
So
right.
So 38.5 is a low number relative to last year. Lost Paul George though. I mean, I know the answer, but tell me about your Clippers over under thoughts.
I went hard under here, and I think you texted me this. I'll let you say it. What did you text me the other day?
Well, just that like this 25 pick that they owe the Thunder that's unfucking protected could go down as like an all-time like, oh my, because we haven't got to the Thunder yet, but newsflash, we both think they're going to be really great. You're adding like what if it's Cooper Flag? If we add Cooper Flag to the Thunder, like what that I think we've put it to bed, but we could probably put to bed the there's two sides to who won the Paul George trade at that point. Like
right.
Unbelievable that could happen.
It's just so how many games we both went under? Like that was just I have them at 31.
Yeah.
What did you have them at?
I have them at 30. And like, the disaster potential is just like staring you in the face. It's already kind of started because Kawhi Leonard couldn't play with Team USA and is like, the comments are like taking it slow day by day. Like, it's like, we know how this movie ends, right?
Yeah. And my whole thing is, even if Kawhi Leonard plays, let's say Kawhi Leonard hits the 65 game, like let's just use that as the threshold because that's for the awards. And I think you would say objectively, oh, like that's a good position to be in. They had Kawhi Leonard play, like he was able to make All NBA again or something. They had that last year, and the Clippers still lost the minutes that Harden and Kawhi played without Paul George. It's just, Westbrook's not there anymore, so that might help out a little bit. But when you go through those lineups, he's actually not like a mainstay in a lot of the most used combinations. So this team just feels thin, and they got younger, they got more athletic, but like we're kind of talking about, they're going to give Kevin Porter Jr. a really big role. It's not like a good place to be in the year 2024 if you're trying to win basketball games. So 31 feels so low for a team that has Kawhi Leonard and James Harden are still stars. When they are healthy, they are still stars. And Ivica Zubac is really good. Norman Powell serves a purpose. There's talent on this team. Derek Jones Jr., Chris Dunn, that'll give you more rim pressure, more defense. I don't know. For me, it comes down to this, that you are banking on Kawhi Leonard being healthy enough to make you a good basketball team. And based off what we've heard, like to just not forget about Team USA, but to start training camp, I don't know how you make that assumption.
And I think in addition to that one, I think you have to assume that James Harden is at least as good as he was last year. And he's 35 and has not been a workout warrior ever. And is always a guy that like, if things aren't going great, whether it has to do with his role or the team's success or anything, like who knows what's on the table there. Right. Like, so I am concerned. Ty Lue's a really good coach. There are like Ivica Zubac is good. Terrence Mann, they have like NBA players up and down this roster. I'm concerned that like the groupthink has captured us and we're not being quite critical enough of like, the Clippers are done, they're falling off, because that's what everybody thinks. But like just logically looking at it, the way that they beat this number just involves too many things that I don't think are going to happen. Like Kawhi health, Harden is at least as good as last year, and the supporting cast is up for, even Kawhi health means 65 games. It's like, all right, that's 17 where it's Harden and the Hardenaires like trying to beat a really good West, slate of teams. I don't know.
At full strength, this team is just objectively less dynamic offensively than it was. Like you might have more athleticism and more rim pressure, but you're not as dynamic. Like in terms of like, who's there? Who's your third best creator right now? Is it Kevin Porter Jr.? Is it Terrence Mann? Is it Norman Powell?
Yeah. Again, I'm worried that we're just, we've been captured by everybody's thought, but it's just like, I just don't see it.
By the way, the backup 5 rotation is no great shakes either. We're just going to assume that Mo Bamba and maybe they're going to see a lot of Nicholas Batum at center is just fine.
Right.
Like, that's just cool.
A guy who is basically out of the league and another guy who's, how old is Batum? Is he 36, 37?
I think he's 35 at least. Let's see. Nicholas
I
Batum.
love Batum, but I mean,
like, that was a good pickup. I thought he was going to retire. I'm happy he's still in the NBA. Yeah, he's 35.
Yeah.
So I'll ask you this. What is more likely? The Clippers win as many games as last year, which was 51, or they trade Kawhi Leonard and James Harden?
Oh, man. I think I got to take the trade just because I do not think they can win 51 games. Like,
I
even
guess at that
with great luck.
if you trade Kawhi, but then with James Harden, it's like, we might as well let him come off the books. They'll decline his player option. Like,
Yeah.
what are you going to get for James Harden? Maybe a team's want to give you something in its expiring contracts, but I would be with you there, which is maybe that might be our hottest, like our most mainstream take, is that the Clippers are more likely to trade Harden and Kawhi than win 50 plus games.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I don't know who's, you got to find me the person that thinks they're winning 51 games. I just don't know who that is.
I don't know either. I don't even think they think they're going to win 51 games.
All right, Dan, another LA team here. I was really surprised by this number. The Lakers have an over-under of 42.5.
You said the juice normally flows to the Lakers. Maybe it was going to the Warriors. They had the 43.
Yeah, I don't know. This seems low to me. But I mean, obviously based on our numbers, like not that low, because especially for me where I went. But so how do they beat this? How do they fall short of it? Where do you land?
I have them beating it, but I have them at 43 wins. And they were a team I took some wins away from. I think I initially had them at 45 or 46.
Same.
The way they beat this, like really beat it, would be LeBron James and Anthony Davis remain very healthy again. They're starting the 5-man lineup that JJ Redick outlined from the jump, and none of those guys get hurt. And Jared Vanderbilt, who's not healthy right now, stays healthy. Gabe Vincent stays healthy. And that's how you cake in your defensive improvement, and it doesn't impact your offense. And Max Christie contributes. He's, flying around. There's a lot of motion, and he's helping you out there. Sure. I'm like, for them to hit, like, if we're using kind of 48 wins as just the barometer of, okay, do you belong in the top, or, I mean, last year was 49 wins. So you need to get to 49, let's say, to hit the top 6 of the Western Conference, or 47 to match your win total from last year. It feels like too many things need to be answered in the affirmative for the Lakers to like assume that that's going to be, that their best case outcome is attainable, because their best case, like they had best case availability at the top last year in LeBron and AD.
Right.
How is that going to get better?
It's not.
Okay.
It's not. Like, that is the question though, right? Like, because you can say, well, Gabe Vincent and Jared Vanderbilt, and like maybe D'Angelo Russell either is the guy you need at that position, or when you trade him, he gets you the guy that you need at that position. And Dalton Connect is like a positively impactful rookie. We've like rolled our eyes at that for most of the offseason.
Notably, we've legitimately named no wings during this.
Right. So the roster has like, even if, I mean, I think the fixation is properly on the availability of the best players, which was at like A+ last year. And if it becomes a B-, then that's where you're in the high 30s as a win, like in win total. So I went under. I went 42. Like you, though, I had them and a bunch of other teams at like 45, 46, 47. And then I was just like, well, that's not going to work. It's got to come from somewhere. I do think like there's a 50-win team in here if all the luck from last year carries over, and also you get Gabe Vincent for a full season and all this, all the other breaks happen in their favor. But I just, you can't count on I cited it a million times in stuff I wrote over the offseason, but it's like, it was the most games LeBron had played in several years. It might have been a career high for Davis. There's like 70+ for both of these guys. And it's just 147 total, I think was the number, 76 and 71. That's not happening.
The other thing that's slightly concerning, I don't necessarily get caught up in this, but when you have LeBron saying that it's not fair to have expectations in JJ Redick's first season at the helm, I'm like, all right, like, so maybe there's just are they going to try and like manage minutes and really plan around the future and be like, hey, we're going to actually really go for it at age 41 LeBron. Forget about age 40 LeBron. I have a question for you. I've been waiting for this one. Who is more likely Well, as currently constructed, which team, I guess you already said the Warriors will win more games than the Lakers, basically, is where you have them. Which team is more likely to try and make a trade that elevates their immediate ceiling, the Warriors or the Lakers?
I would guess, well, it's interesting because you're definitely not bought in on the Warriors being as serious as they've made themselves out to be on that front.
Can you explain to
I
me
think
what evidence we have that they are as serious as people want them to be on that front?
news reports. No, I think it's my gut reaction is the Lakers are more likely to make that trade.
Interesting.
Because LeBron puts pressure on the franchise to do stuff like that in ways that Curry never really has. And I guess if all things being equal, like we kind of know how both guys operate, or at least outwardly. Maybe Curry puts just as much on. He just doesn't like subtweet the franchise.
Well,
so I guess Lakers.
I actually think it's the Warriors, in part because of what, again, those LeBron comments are like seared into my brain. Just not really something that he said before, that he has nothing left to prove and people get mad.
Right.
No, like
Extra
he has
credit.
nothing left to prove. Like he's the greatest player of all time. I'm sorry. Michael Jordan could be in the conversation. You could talk about the record in the finals. He got there a zillion times. My whole thing is, the Warriors, they acted over the offseason, even though I think some of it was performative. They actually did make additions and changes to their roster. You know what the Lakers did? They drafted Dalton Connect and they re-signed Max Christie. So I don't buy, I can't buy into the Lakers really believing that there's a much better team in there from last year just because of Darvin Ham. Even if you think Darvin Ham, let's say he cost them 6 wins. That's such an arbitrary number, but that would bring them to 53. Are you going to get, let's just say, okay, JJ Redick brings that team out. Are they going to be healthy enough to be a 53-win team? That was last year. Like, there's just one of LeBron James or Anthony Davis is going to miss extensive time. It's probably going to be Anthony Davis, if not both of them. And maybe we're wrong. If you told me they played if I told you they played in as many games together as they did last year, what would you like nudge up your total to what? Would it still be a 47?
I'd go over. Yeah. I think I'd probably not. I'd go like 45, 46, I think, just because the West is
one
tough.
fewer, 1-2 fewer than last year, which is wild. The West is brutal. You know why the West is also brutal? Because the Grizzlies are kind of, sort of, they're back in the sense that they're still snake bitten. That's for sure. Over under 47.5. I'm sorry. I keep taking the West teams. I apologize.
That's okay. No. So 47.5. This was one for me that, like, I really don't feel like my prediction squares with what I think about the team, but let's hear from you first. Where do you have the Grizzlies?
So I went under, which means that Grizzlies fans should be excited because every time I've gone under, they've went over. And the 1 year I went over, Grant, was last year. And guess what happened? Here's my whole thing with it. I could easily see them winning 50-something games again. But you're going to tell me that Ja Morant, Jaren Jackson Jr., those guys aren't going to miss time. Jaren Jackson Jr.'s missed time previously in his career. That Marcus Smart isn't going to miss time. We already know Gigi Jackson's going to miss time and that Vince Williams could miss a bunch of time. You're still kind of thin on the wings. Do you have enough shooting to open up your half-court offense beyond Luke Kennard, who, by the way, someone else who's probably going to miss time? And then the other thing that I think we're not waiting enough, and maybe it's, we have seen rookies come in and just be immediately impactful, including rookie big men. Zach Edey's just going to play a crap ton of minutes, and you're going to be a lot better off for it, in addition to all these injuries kind of floating around. We had someone in our YouTube comments, I just said this was spicy. I wouldn't predict it. They're like, Zach Edey is going to lead the league in rebounds if he gets enough minutes. What? But how many minutes is he playing to do that? And if you're playing Zach, I thought Zach Edey was going to play like maybe 25 minutes. If he leads the league in rebounds, he's probably playing 30 plus. What does that do to your offense? Is it going to be good? I think defensively, they'll just be fine. The Jaren Jackson Jr., Zach Edey pairing is just so intuitive. I'm not worried about Zach Edey on defense, even relative to his limitations. There are just too many question marks with this team. And I know you can say you could play the health game with every single team. Okay, fine. Let's say they're relatively healthy, even though at this moment we know that they're not. What is the ceiling offensively for them? It's just, do they have enough to really, I know Desmond Bane and Jaren Jackson Jr. got a lot better last year, but this is still a team that even when it's at its best, it's always struggled to generate efficiency in the half court. Let's go back to 22-23 when they were, what were they, second in the West? 22nd in half court efficiency. The year before that, also 22nd in half court efficiency. The year before that, bottom 5 in half court efficiency. 2019, 2020, 22nd in half court efficiency. The Grizzlies have not had, Grant, an above average half court offense since 2014, 2015. And it's just, what are the pieces that make you believe that's going to change this year? I guess it just comes down to a healthy John Morant and Desmond Bane and a healthy Marcus Smart. And then if Luke Kennard is stretching the floor, sure. But we just named a lot of variables that are just, a healthy John Morant and Marcus Smart and a healthy Luke Kennard. It's just I know every team has health question marks. There are now officially just too many here for me to assume they're going to resume their 50-win pace. And this is all to say I have them under at 44, and it stung because that's really low. But I think when you couple the injury risks with what I still believe are some offensive limitations, with the fact that I think they're going to be really reliant on someone who still needs to develop in the middle and Zach Edey. Again, maybe I'm overweighting that because Zach Edey's a 4-year college player. Those dudes come in, maybe they can make more of an immediate impact. There's just something or some things off about this team that is tough for me to square away.
So I'm at 47, and this was another case where I think there's 55 win upside with this team. And the way that would happen is the gains Desmond Bane and Jaren Jackson Jr. had to make offensively last year stick. And Morant is just Morant. He's right back to, top 10 MVP type guy, which is I don't know. I think he's a guy that's going to when the fall off comes, because his game is so based on athleticism and he's small, it's going to come quick. I don't think we're there yet. I think he's got 2-3 more peak, he just physically dominates games with his athleticism levels. The injuries are a huge concern. And again, this is just so for me, I have the Grizzlies winning 47 and I have the Pacers winning 47. I think the Grizzlies are a way better team than the Pacers. It's just when you're gaming out the West and you're trying to, you get this far into the over-unders, we're more than halfway through, you start looking at where do I think the Grizzlies are going to fall? And it's if I give them 55, I think I have them winning the conference or second in the conference. That I don't see. So if I think teams X, Y, and Z are, 52, 51, 49, it's Memphis, I don't think is better than any of them. So I just have to move them down and peeling off wins. So I'm higher on them than you are, I think, but I'm technically under, and I hate it because I just think the Grizzlies have such potential to beat that number. It's just that the West is hard and the downside's real, right? The health stuff. And if the health stuff weren't already happening, I think I probably would have gone over, but it's just oh no, here we go again. I think that scared me a little bit.
That brings us to the Miami Heat. Their over under is 44.5, Grant. Where do you land with this team?
So I'm over, I'll just spoil it there, but this was really hard. I think and again, I'm not saying you did this, but I could be so easily persuaded that 49, no problem. I am at 45, so just barely beating it. But if you just go down the list and say okay, Jimmy Butler's all business this year, and so is Tyler Hero. He also got a haircut, so that means you're all business. And then Bam Adebayo, we love him, and full season of Terry Rozier, and maybe the whole we don't really bring it regular season wise. Talking about Butler specifically, maybe that there's been enough of that and that changes. I do think that Butler is at an age where some slippage is real. The availability that Pat Riley pointed out pretty publicly that's just a thing. He didn't make that up. And
did you see Jimmy Butler's comments on those comments? He shows up late to media day and he's talking about how he just wants to be more available. And Pat was right.
Yeah.
And I'm I kind of vibe it. I think that's I don't think it was him being passive aggressive. I think I kind of vibe it.
Yeah, no, I think again, that's why I could see them being fourth in the East or whatever. But I do think that again, that the offense is going to be a problem because it depends way too much on Tyler Hero, who by the way, even when he's been healthy and on the floor, he actually has not been the needle mover offensively that they the makeup of the roster would suggest that he is or needs to be. The on-off stuff is pretty balanced, whether he's out there or not. So I'm factoring in the injury stuff, pricing in whatever might happen with Butler. We have to acknowledge that they might trade him or he might, things might go Minnesota sideways potentially, not likely, but possible. So I'm over, but it's, by half a win here.
I went over as well. I went to 46 with them, I believe, and which is the exact same number they had last year. And I'm kind of just like, Spo will carve out wins from this team. I do think that I don't know if I would expect offensive progression. They're still way too reliant on Jimmy Butler in that sense. But if you have a healthy Tyler Hero and Terry Rozier, that's a ton of floor spacing. Bam has continued to get incrementally better. I am curious what the offense, like, what is the lineup structure that you can build to where you are net positive when Jimmy Butler's off the court, or like at least putting up a functional offense, but you might be still so good defensively it doesn't matter. I think it's slightly concerning that the Heat had a offensive rating in the 12th percentile last year when Bam played without Butler. And I don't know. I mean, again, if you have both Hero and Rozier, but if you're playing them during those stretches, what does the defense look like? You are also asking Hayward Highsmith to take on a bigger role this year. I assume Nikola Jovic will be taking on even more of a bigger role. I think there are enough interesting pieces here. It's what I struggle with is, and maybe we're guilty of this, like kind of up and down when we're talking about the Lakers and the Warriors, is when is the right time, even if you haven't seen it, to like assume there's going to be real regression from these aging stars, whether it's LeBron, whether it's Steph, whether it's Jimmy Butler, whether it's a Damian Lillard, who we'll probably talk about in a second. I just think there's enough guys that could get better off that sort of special Heat sauce, whether it's Highsmith, Jaime Jaquez Jr., of course. Khalil Ware, I see, is fascinating to me. I think, if nothing else, this team's games will be ugly. I don't know if they're built to play any faster because they don't play particularly fast. They might be ugly, but they still should be able to defend their asses off when you look at the personnel that they have. And if you could just get better availability from Jimmy Butler, like two of Jimmy Butler, Tyler Hero, and Terry Rozier, when looking at what happened with his neck towards the end of last season, I think that's enough to be where you're at last year, which would clear the over on this. And that's just kind of where I land with Miami.
Yeah, similar thinking.
The Bucks at 50.5, Mr. Grant Hughes. I think this is one where we differ, so I'm excited. Tell me where your thoughts are with this team.
I have to find my number. Oh yeah, okay. So I think Damian Lillard's going to be better. I think the off-court adjustment, like, went through a divorce, like all that stuff.
He's also missing, by the way, I'm sorry.
No, I know where you're going. Go ahead.
Okay, go ahead. If you were going to make the point, to make yourself.
No. This is your point.
He was missing open threes.
Right.
Like, that's not a sign of, like, man, Dame's getting old. Like, no, this wasn't, Dame couldn't get into the lane or finish anything on drives. This was Damian Lillard was missing a shot that basketball players in their 40s could make, and that's not going to continue. I'm sorry.
I know. I totally agree with that. And I think he will be better. I think it's equally, if not more likely, that the Chris Middleton, Brook Lopez combo is like worse enough that it offsets that. Right. So like, the Middleton dual ankle surgery is the pretty persistent, we're ramping him up. And then like the ramp up yields minute totals in the 20s. And we're just like, okay, so, and he's still critically important to this team. Now that's typically discussed in the context of like, can they win a championship? We're just talking about how many regular season games are they going to win? I think if anything, Chris Middleton will be treated like very carefully and not make a huge impact during the year. So even if he is, looking pretty good, maybe he's not allowed to play as much as you might need to beat this 50.5. Brook Lopez is way past the age where you'd say this guy is going to fall off. Has been super durable the last 2 years after some pretty scary back stuff 3 years ago. Just at some point you were asking, like, when should we expect these older guys to slip? I'm going under at 49 wins here, just because I think that should be the likeliest outcome for a couple really key guys on the Bucks. I also don't believe in Doc Rivers as like the guy to sort this mess out, because we got a pretty large sample last year and it wasn't any better than what Adrian Griffin got fired for record wise. So I don't like going under because I think Giannis sets such a high floor. But even he's someone like, now you wouldn't have known it last year, career high true shooting, second year of over 30 points a game, still awesome defensively. Even he's someone that we're at the point where like a lot of his game is based on athleticism. It's not just effort and like skill. Tiny slippage there. Because if Giannis isn't like top 5 MVP, then I'm not sure where you're getting over 50 wins here with this team. So there's just like a lot of ways to like inject a little doubt, and I bought enough of them to go under.
I say we differ. I went over, but I went over with 50. Oh, wait, did I go under? That's a typo. I went over at 51 wins, I believe. I have them ticketed for. So Yeah, this is, I would agree with everything you
No,
say.
you're
And
under. You got him for 50. I'm looking at it right now.
I have him at 50. All right,
You
I
have him
went
at 50.
under. So look at that. I could see them easily. We didn't differ at all, apparently. So I think you outlaid all my concerns. My other thing that even if they're healthy, how many players deep do they go that you trust? I asked this same question with, I don't even remember which team it was now. Was it the Clippers? Whatever. But how many? I think you can argue 6 if you want to include Bobby Portis plus the starting 5. And after that, it's okay. DeLon Wright and Taurean Prince at the minimum is good. How much do you trust them? Are you going to get real minutes from AJ Green or the rookie Tyler Smith? Does Pat Connaughton play better this year? Is the Marjon Beauchamp like era over before it even could have potentially began? And if we're at a point where you're saying, okay, Lillard, Giannis, Brook Lopez, and Middleton have all had their best seasons already. Their best days are behind. I'm not saying regression, but their best days are behind them. And now we're starting to get into the bench and it's okay. I still want to say this is a 50-win team, and I would believe it. I thought I went over, so you can see where I'm at with the Bucks. I probably ended up pulling a win from them last minute to give to someone else. There's more drop-off potential here, and they could wind up I'm just wondering. I also wonder how much of a focus will be to win regular season games. They could just decide like we'll finish top 6 and we think we can match up with anyone in the playoffs and beat them. And hey, when you look at their top 5 guys, you're probably right. Like that starting lineup, if everyone's healthy, is going to be a killer.
Great point. This is a team that like, I think we're both uncomfortable going under because we both have so much respect for Giannis and think he's so great and believe that Lillard will bounce back. But it's like, this just isn't a team that's going to be chasing regular season wins because their issues in the postseason have been health. Like these first round outs have been health related for the most part. So it's like, if they get in with 46 wins, then they're just like, we'll take our chances with a healthy Dame and Giannis and Middleton, who's been babied all year. And we think we can beat anyone. So I would say I'll speak for you. Like, I think we believe them to be a better, like, title threat than a team that could like win the East in the regular season, right? Like, I don't think that's the goal.
Yeah. This next team, Grant, buddy.
All right. So the Minnesota Timberwolves come in with an over-under of 52.5, which is down from the 56 games they won last year with the differential of a 58-win team. Best defense in the league, probably not going to change. If it does, they'll be second or third best. And
it'll be proof that Karl-Anthony Towns was the secret sauce behind everything.
Right.
It was never Rudy Gobert.
He was the reason. Rudy Gobert is washed. France was right to bench him all the time in the Olympics. So this one's fascinating because we have the cat for Julius Randle and DiVincenzo trade. We have the Anthony Edwards potential ascent. We've got like, just so where are you on the 52.5 for them?
I went over. I ended up pulling wins from them though, because I initially had them, I think at like 56 or 57. It might've been 56 again, but I was just kind of thinking that I went with 53. So I have them over. I'm just wondering, it's going to take time. This wouldn't be, I'll say it this way. It wouldn't shock me if this is a team where everyone's demanding they tear it down or they're hitting the panic button like 15 games into the season, because it takes a while to implement Julius Randle and figure out which lineups to run him in, how you're going to use him. The more I've thought about the trade, I do think that the Knicks took on more risk than the Timberwolves when you're looking at both the short and long term, because I think that you could very easily just decide if Julius Randle's that poor of a fit, write it off, don't play him. He probably won't opt out then, but then he's just this huge expiring contract. That's the worst case scenario. But Julius Randle, despite being divisive, and rightfully so, he's a hard player to fit in, but like he's going to have more on-ball gravity. And if you decide, okay, you start him, we're going to heavily stagger him so that he's going to spend a majority of his minutes running second unit heavy lineups, or it's going to be DiVincenzo and Naz Reid will be around him more than Jaden McDaniels and Rudy Gobert together. Like if you're worried about the spacing from that perspective. And so I think there could be a slower learning curve. And honestly, I wonder if the timing of the trade almost helps them, because it forces Julius Randle to streamline himself, whereas I'm just catching in decision-making. I'm not really ISOing even in these lineups where maybe Anthony Edwards isn't on the court. And I also think that while I'm concerned about the fit between Randle and Anthony Edwards is a good off-ball shooter. And just like you weren't really concerned about the fit of like Kyle Anderson being on the court sometimes with Anthony Edwards. Is like, what's the difference here? Like Julius Randle's going to be, at least I think he does things that they were missing on offense, even if it comes at the expense of some floor spacing, and you make up a lot of that floor spacing with Dante DiVincenzo. I still would have liked to have seen them keep Towns. I think they had a championship ceiling, and this doesn't feel like that Boston offseason where the turnover instantly results in a title. It feels like it could need more time to marinate. I think they're going to be better than this 52.5 line, but I do think it's going to take a little while for it all to come together. And the other final thing is, I don't think this will be as big of a factor because they have Julius Randle now. But like, if you are going to try and play Rob Dillingham, that's going to be something that kind of adds to the learning curve of the entire team.
Yeah, I think that's right. So I can see the like it's going to take a minute angle, but I can also see like I feel like I understand the theory of how this team could really pop, which is like the depth is these guys are 8 deep, like no question, because you can have whether it's Reed, it'll be Reed, I guess. Like, although I'm just like, I want to start Reed and I want Randall on the second unit. That's not going to happen, I don't think.
But you could stagger it that way.
Like, you can stagger it. So, yeah. But your 6, 7, 8 right now is DiVincenzo, one of the best shooters in the league. Dillingham, I guess, who like doesn't have a heavy lift now, and Reed, who won 6th Man of the Year.
Like, I would actually argue that you're selling it short, because I was going to say it's Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Reed, and Dante DiVincenzo for me.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm trying to think about some of the, like, if you're running out, let's say DiVincenzo, Nah, Reed, and just think about how you can flesh out like those 3 bench guys together. I'd probably put like Julius and like throw out whoever you want at that. I mean, if you want to go Dillingham and really lean into the bench, sure, but keep Jaden McDaniels out there. There's so many different ways they could go. And you're right. They're just 8 deep of guys that, even if you don't like Julius Randle, like they're 8 deep of really good NBA players.
Right. And this is a little bit the reverse of the Bucks, where I think this team is like really well constructed for a lot of regular season wins, because they're just going to have a bunch of above average or like actually just objectively good NBA players on the floor all the time. And you can lose like Naz Reid. Okay, Naz Reid gets hurt. Well, McDaniels can play some 4, and you have Julius Randle. Like Gobert gets hurt, I suppose that is like kind of or diminishes a lot. Like your defense is going to have some issues, but like I don't think Anthony Edwards is done getting better. I think Jaden McDaniels might have another gear, and it's just the depth and the fit. If they can play it right, there's so many configurations that make sense to me, and that will just beat the Pelicans on a Tuesday in March. You know, like there's just so many ways they can rack up these wins. So I'm over. I think I have them at 54. And this was another team that I was like 2 or 3 higher that, again, I had to peel some off.
It wouldn't shock me if they just won more games than they did, because you could argue they care more about the playoffs. I actually think they might be better built for the regular season right now than the playoffs after the trade, because that's all about the Julius Randle playoff track record. And also with some of the Rudy Gobert matchup stuff there. So, but it wouldn't shock me if they won like 59. It just would. Next team up, New Orleans Pelicans.
Dan, this is a 45.5 over under, which is pretty good for a team that doesn't have a center. So, and also quite a bit lower than last year's total when the Pelicans won. What did they win? 49. What are your thoughts on your Pels? They're very much your Pels.
Well, I think a lot of Pels fans have gotten mad because I've been pretty pessimistic on how they've gotten to this roster construction. I'm going over here in spite of not loving their setup. I have them at 48 wins. And if they eventually make a move to kind of balance out what their team should look like, the Trey Murphy injury is a bummer. You do have to factor in the Zion Williamson injury potential of it all. But Zion last year was close to one of the, like when he was healthy, 10 best players in basketball, certainly one of the 15 best players in basketball when he was healthy. So I just I understand this team can be dynamic even when they're playing small. I think it's encouraging that we saw them start Daniel Tice the other night. I don't love the center setup, but at least shows, okay, we're not going to play small out of the gate.
Right.
And I love how people conflate us saying the Pelicans not having a center or playing small, or Zion as the big. Well, Zion's not going to play the 5. I understand what they're going to do, but that doesn't make me feel any better when you're trying to make these wings do a lot of the big man stuff around him. So I think it's encouraging that, okay, they're not going to start small from the jump, and maybe they'll probably close that way. If this team is going to reach its peak, there needs to be some type of a like semi-significant. I mean, maybe if you just got a center using a smaller salary, sure. If it's Jordan Hawkins for Walker Kessler, if there's a framework there that you can get to, I'd probably feel a lot better. But in all likelihood, it needs to be something where, well, can you reorient around a Brandon Ingram trade? And even if they can't, I still think they'll be a really good team. But I think the best version, if they're going to reach contention and blow past 48, 49, get into the 50-win territory, this will not be the team that we see today. I still think if everyone's healthy, and this is me like kind of caking in relatively good health, I think the DeJounte Murray addition is going to matter. They could certainly flirt with that 50-win total.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm over by a smaller margin than you. I got them at 46. And that really just is, I think they will add a center. And if that comes via an Ingram trade that makes that just gives Herb and a healthy Trey Murphy those minutes, I love it. And it's the design injury risk, the lack of a center. I think Murray, like I got pretty far into my thinking on this number before I was like, oh shit, they have DeJounte Murray, right? Like I just like, it's crazy that that's an afterthought, but it kind of is because, everybody's discussing the center stuff like, much more frequently. The upside is big, especially like what if Zion like just has the best year of his career, which is like something you would expect from someone at this stage of his career. If you didn't have the injury history, maybe that's just over. Maybe he's in the best shape ever. Like that's plausible to me. We haven't seen it really yet for a full season, but it could happen. Again, like you start trying to slot teams into a hierarchy in the West, and it's just like, well, I can't put them above Denver. I can't put them above Minnesota. So you just, the wins start falling off.
Right. Yeah.
We're both still over, I guess, is the positive sign here for Pelicans fans. And we're generally just like lower on several West teams as far as like compared to last year's win totals. And I just think that's a reflection of like there, except for one, probably there's most of the teams in the West, I think on the higher end are just going to lose a win or two. I think just because there's so much quality up and down the conference.
I'm trying to think. Yeah. So I think we've gotten past every team in the West that would qualify for this. The consensus we have as the top four, this isn't a spoiler. So OKC, Dallas, Denver, Minnesota. I'm not necessarily saying it's in that order. Which is the team that would be most likely to party crash that top four and bounce someone out? You don't have to pick who they're bouncing out, but the team that
we haven't talked about one of them yet, or two of them actually, or not just one. I think. I mean, Memphis is in the conversation. We'll talk about Phoenix as the other one. Probably.
Oh God, I forgot about Phoenix. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Actually, speaking of, that is not our consensus top four. Apparently, when I went through and did mine, so I think that means that we need to move on.
I guess so.
Eastern Conference time. New York Knicks over under 54.5. Grant, where are you at with your Knicks?
Man, like, so I'll just spoil it now. I know we're not trying to do it this way, but like I'm under and I hate it because I think the talent, the top end talent on this team is absurd. The main reason I went under, I guess there's two, is I do think that, and I'm glad we haven't gone to this well quite so often in the last several teams, because I think it's really specifically applicable here. A Jalen Brunson injury is catastrophic. And so I'm pricing that in to going under at 52, if I didn't say that already. And I think there are depth issues. That's going out on a limb here when you trade, multiple rotation guys for one. Deuce McBride I like, and then after that, the bench is like, I don't know. 52 wins is a lot of wins. It's actually fewer than they won last year. Or no, it's more. They only won 50 last year. So I've got nothing to explain here. I think the Knicks are going to be better than they were a year ago. I just don't think they're hitting 54.5. But I don't think very many teams in the West or in the East are going to get over that number.
See, I went under as well. And I didn't go under by much. I have them at 53 right now. I was like kind of vacillating between them and Cleveland in that 53, 52 win spot. Mm-hmm. My issue is here. Karl-Anthony Towns feels like he'll be more plug and play, but you outline the Jalen Brunson stuff. They're a team that just exhausted their asset stores and have now made themselves arguably more dependent on their best player than they were before. Mm-hmm. That's iffy. In part because of the depth, but also just the shot creation, the playmaking. You can talk about what everyone else did. You could talk. Mikal Bridges is a perfect example. He was on the Nets last year as basically their featured option. Grant, he didn't rank in the top 50 of unassisted 2-pointers made or unassisted 3-pointers made. Top 50 in the league. That doesn't mean he's a bad player, but don't just pencil in Mikal Bridges. He's a viable number 2.
Right.
Guess what? Karl-Anthony Towns wasn't in that top 50 either. And you also have the depth issue. This isn't the Tibbs. the thing that what makes me want to go over is like Tibbs is going to coach to win 57. Like he wants the 1 seed.
Mm-hmm.
But this isn't the Tibbs thing. These players haven't played for Tibbs for too long. OG Anunoby has played in 70 or more games or the equivalent, looking at the shortened season, twice in his career. Karl-Anthony Towns has done so once over the past half decade. This team has players that, and yes, Mikal Bridges is an Iron Man. I tend to view that as you continue to get older, that you're just overdue to miss some time.
Right.
Josh Hart played a zillion minutes last year, mostly out of necessity. What if that catches up to him? I'm not predicting all of this, but stuff is going to come up. We already know Mitchell Robinson's going to miss time. So your top second unit guys are Deuce McBride, and then you get to like Precious Achiuwa, or is it Landry Shamet?
Yeah.
And that's a weird spot to be in. And I don't really know. They're not out of trade options, but like, what is the move? Are you using Mitchell Robinson's salary, assuming a team still wants him, to try and get like 2 players? And you could still aggregate. So is it, trading 2 players for 3? Or I've seen that they might be interested in Marcus Smart, which I don't really understand, because I think I'd rather have Deuce McBride at his price point. Although it might say more about, well, we think Marcus Smart can defend bigs, and now we have Karl-Anthony Towns as our center. I think this team's going to be really good. I think they're kind of how I just said that the Timberwolves, to me, feel like they're better built to dominate the regular season than playoffs. The Knicks feel like if they're healthy, they're going to be more of a nightmare playoff matchup than when we're looking at surviving the regular season. What's counterintuitive about that, though, is that if they're healthy, if no one misses time, they're probably going to win like 60-something games because Tibbs is going to coach them that way.
Yeah, there's a weird thought exercise I couldn't decide on it, so I scrapped it, but maybe you can get there. It's like on the nights where Jalen Brunson's not playing and it's just like campaign, right? Or whoever like is
Tyler Kolek, apparently.
The rookie is at that position, right? Like, how good is that team? And you want to say like, well, Bridges, Anunoby, Cat, like Hart, that team is still really good overall talent-wise, but it's like you just don't have the guy that is going to put these other players in positions to score and like generate his own stuff. And it's so I think you said your point about like they got more talent and they also somehow like made Jalen Brunson, like his unique skill set, even like more precious and rare. Like that is that's where I really come down on this, is like, it's all falling apart if Brunson's not there. And that's just priced into the 52 wins, I think.
And by the way, he finished last year injured and he played a bunch of minutes. And so it's just like, even let's say these guys don't get injured. Is there a chance for, and by the way, Jalen Brunson specifically, I'm not predicting regression, but if he's anything less than a top 5 MVP candidate again, you could argue maybe you're not worse as a basketball team, but you're probably certainly worse in the regular season when you're just looking at wins. He's
another guy where it's like, how much better? He can't get better. Like, right? Like, that's just, I mean, the odds he gets better are like 5%. Like, it's just, this is about as good as you can be.
I'll push back and say he has never played with this type of usage with this type of spacing. He had the spacing in Dallas, not the usage. And in New York, he's had the usage and not the spacing. But even so, it's Jalen Brunson getting 5% better when you don't have like, who is their second best player, or who's their second most important player? Who's their second most valuable player? There might be different answers to those questions.
Yeah. I mean, to me, my first reaction was Anunoby, just because of like what he means to the Cat of it all, like at center. But like, he's definitely not creating his own shots. So like the thing is, like, there isn't that guy, because normally you would say it would be that guy, or like probably a lot of people would say Bridges, because they remember that stretch where he looked like a guy that, oh my God, he's not a third option on Phoenix. He actually is someone that can run an offense. I don't think the most recent evidence bears that out. I don't think he is that guy. So I don't know.
I would be with you.
Dan, big one here. Been waiting to discuss this one with you, mostly because your win total is fantastic. 56.5 for the Oklahoma City Thunder, who, by the way, won 57 last year, have lots of young players, and added 2 incredible rotation pieces to the roster. Where I feel like half jokingly ask you, what do you think about that 56.5?
Way too low. I understand. Okay, 57's a lot. And so kind of the theory that you used with the Celtics of they have to win less, right? In this case, the answer is no. Show me what is the weakness of this team? Where's the hole? You can talk about, I don't want to get into the championship stock of it all, even though I think their championship stock is higher than ever. In terms of strictly regular season victories, why is this team winning fewer than 60 games?
That's rhetorical.
I have them at 65.
I guess I have to explain that anyway, go ahead.
So I have them at 65. You don't have to go that far over, but I think this is a comfortable over for me. You could say, am I not like, what am I supposed to factor in? I'm not wishing this on anything. There's one player they can't lose, and it's Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. And he's not a player that you can factor in. He missed time when they weren't trying to win.
Yeah.
And so they could lose Chet Holmgren for the season again. It's just like, well, they have like another top 15 on the roster and Isaiah Hartenstein. Mm-hmm. So I'm so unbelievably high on this team. And I don't think that they have any material weaknesses. If I had to pick one from my perspective, it would be, do they have enough shot creation, bankable shot creation outside of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander? I'm just going to assume like you're a little bit more dynamic with Isaiah Hartenstein here, the stuff he could do out of the short roll. And I'm just going to assume that Jalen Williams and or Chet Holmgren get better, which isn't necessarily a major leap to make. So my question to you is, are you prepared to explain yourself for being so low on this team?
Right. I'm at 59, so I'm over. I will explain my process. I needed to make sure that one, the Thunder had the highest win total of any. I'm over. What are you doing? Don't give me an under on there.
Oh, typo. Sorry.
How dare you? that I could not explain if I was under. I needed to make sure they had the best record in the West, which they do here. I needed to make sure I penciled them in for more games, more wins than they got last year, which I did narrowly, going from 57. I am at 59. And I needed to do that while balancing this goddamn win-loss thing. And so if I just in my like heart of hearts, I think the number for me is like 62. But I just couldn't get that high. I just needed to get a high enough number to accomplish those other two things, which I did. There's no other team I'm higher on than the Thunder this season. I don't have anybody winning 60 games. Spoiler for the 10 teams we got left. So yeah, I feel like I do need to explain myself. Like, why is your prediction of 59 wins so low? But like that, if that doesn't illustrate what I think about the Thunder, then I don't know what does. I said my hot take was they're going to have 3 All-Stars this year, because I think Williams and Chet can get there to join Shai. So like, I mean,
is it so? Honestly, the path to them even hitting the under, if we're not factoring in injuries, is it just that the wins are just so evenly distributed throughout the West, where it's like we have 5 teams that are like 54 and 26.
Yeah, the path is like they never have to play the Jazz, Blazers, Clippers. Like I don't know. Yeah, they only play the other top teams in the West. Something ridiculous. Yeah, so I mean, the depth is unbelievable. Like SGA is another guy that's like, how much better can he actually get? Like, because he's been second in MVP voting, so I guess technically he can be slightly better, but he's an all NBA shoe-in. Like, I do think there's at least a couple other guys that we might discuss in that level. If it's not this year, then like towards the end of the year and next year. And just like, you know, to illustrate your point of like, other than SGA, it's like, oh my God, what if Lou Dort pulls a hamstring? It's like, well, Alex Caruso is probably going to be just fine guarding people. And like, I go through this team and I just forget Cason Wallace is on it. And it's like, I mean, he's one of our favorite rookies last year. That guy is just going to make threes and defend. And like, what if he adds like anything else?
Right.
Like, and Aaron Wiggins hit half his threes last year. That's low volume, but he's like your 10th guy. I mean, Isaiah Joe is like an actual difference maker as a movement shooter who you can use as a screener. There's just like, I mean, it's a little bit like the Rockets argument where you can't have all 10 of their awesome players on the court at the same time. But that also means that they're always just going to have guys that cause huge problems on both ends. Like they're never going to have a spot in the rotation that is like, oh man, how do we like work around this guy? There's always going to be value adds just up and down this roster. They're stupid good. They're the best team in the regular season to my eye. So I'm with you at least there, even if our win totals are different.
Yeah, I don't even. How would they finish under failing? Is it just that the injury kind of falls off a cliff? Because it's not going to be. It's only injury.
It's only injury.
Because it's not going to be the defense. They have a chance to be like probably one of the best defenses of all time.
Agree. Yeah, I mean that would be the. So you think they'll finish higher on defense than offense? I think that's a pretty clear.
Yeah, I think honestly the only team that which teams could theoretically have a better defense than them? I would say Minnesota and Orlando for sure, and maybe Boston. Like, are you prepared to throw any like those are? And obviously, I mean, OKC finished 4th behind those 3 teams last year. So,
but
no,
they added Hartenstein and Caruso. Oh my God, I can't believe we got this far into it. So Hartenstein and Caruso were 2nd and 5th in defensive estimated plus minus in the league last year. So they added 2 top 5 guys by that metric. It's not the be all end all, but it's persuasive. And like, the tape ain't lying, at least as far as Caruso. Like, that guy is hell out there if you're an offensive player. So yeah, 4 on defense is like the floor. They can't be worse than 4th.
By the way, this doesn't apply to defense. They can, like, if it turns out like, oh, we do need some extra shot creation juice or more shooting, let's say, might be they could go trade for it.
Oh my God. Like, yeah, the picks are still maybe they trade that 25 first back to the Clippers and just have Kawhi and they send salary filler. Like,
what would it, if Jalen Williams, Chet Holmgren, and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander are all healthy, I wouldn't even think about making it. If it was just that pick, or like even one of the Clippers picks and then salary to any salary, by the way, it's just when the problem with the Thunder making that trade is just like, there's no salary that they send out that isn't valuable.
Right.
Well, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, like, we're both saying they're going to win more games than anyone in the league this year. We're both saying that. And they have the easiest path, if they want to, of making themselves better right now than anyone else in the league. Is that an overstatement?
No.
So, like, what are we talking about? 56.5. Like, what? That's insane.
I'm sorry. What are you talking about with 59?
The math. Don't
act like you're like 2.5 wins away from the over under. I'm up here.
Could I take back. What if I took, where are my wins coming from? Can I just knock the Hawks down to like 12 and give 24 more to the Thunder?
Honestly, the team, I was thinking about this. If I had to pull a bunch of wins more from one team, I still feel like it would be Charlotte, to where it's just like, maybe you could throw yourself into Toronto, but Charlotte is just like, they have the injury risk and they might just not want to be good. So it's like, there's very few teams that have both of those factors.
And we've both got the Warriors and the Lakers in like the mid to low 40s. You could pull 5 apiece from either of those, no problem. And then I could have 69 instead of 59 for the Thunder and feel.
You know what? I'll go to 74. Yeah. This next team will be, whoops, there's a spoiler alert on that. A little bit more controversial with the Orlando Magic. Ooh, Mr. Hughes, 47.5. They won 47 last year. This is the classic hedge of just like, oh, this team is going to be better than last year, but how much better?
Yeah.
Where are you at with them?
So this is a hard one. So I think the defense is just a lock. I think the defense will be great. I think Franz Wagner has to shoot better than he did last season. He's just get over 30%, I guess would be cool. I think it's possible they get something from Anthony Black and or Jet Howard. And then obviously KCP gives them another like viable starting caliber wing. I'm still going under and I don't feel great about it. I got them at 46 and it's just like, it's a numbers game and it's the progress isn't linear thing, specifically with respect to like, Jalen Suggs, I don't think is going to shoot it quite as well. And they still just don't have the thing that they needed most in terms like, I mean, the thing you need most is like a bankable, like future star, which I think Paolo is, but like for them specifically, the organizer, the shot creator, the backcourt, like floor general type, don't have that guy. So I'm going under while acknowledging that like objectively the Magic might just be a better, more dangerous team. I just don't think they're going to win quite as many games.
It is the classic progress isn't linear situation. And I probably would have been more prepared to go over had they done more, or if I had faith that they were going to do more to kind of juice their offense. Because as of right now, aside from Franz Wagner shooting better, I know a lot of people have kind of painted this as, well, they think that Anthony Black can continue to develop on the ball. How many minutes is Anthony Black getting on this team?
Yeah.
When you look at who they have available on the perimeter, I honestly think their setup right now is a vote of confidence, first and foremost in Paolo Banchero, fair, and then Jalen Suggs, a little bit more divisive there. I don't know if Jalen Suggs, I did mention this on our hot take pod, that I feel like I could see it. Maybe he becomes more of this methodical playmaker in the half court. I can't guarantee it. And this is all to say winning 47 games is Like, that's a lot of games to win. And I think their offense should be better than like, oh, I'm just going to go ahead and pencil in the Magic for another bottom 10 finish, basically, even though where did they end up last year? I think they were bottom 10 in offense. I'm not
22nd. Yeah, 22nd.
Yeah. So I just don't know that they've done enough to address it. If you told me that, even if you told me they traded for Anthony Simons or Malcolm Brogdon, I might be prepared to go over, but also then integrating players mid-season, who's going out, that gets a little complicated. As of right now, I think that they are a better team. I don't know that that translates much, if at all, to their regular season wins total.
Yeah. I would also add that like a lot of units that they had that involved Jonathan Isaac just destroyed opponents, and he's been a health risk for like his whole career. So I don't any like, 15 minutes a game or whatever it was, but like you might price in a little less availability for him, then that could kind of knock some of that defensive dominance down a little.
And even look, the recently extended Wendell Carter Jr., like he's battled health issues too. So how available will he be? And he kind of struggled with his stop and start availability last year. Next up, Mr. Hughes, the Philadelphia 76ers. This team seems like it was unnecessarily difficult for me. 52.5 though. Where did you land?
So it's hard to discuss them without just acknowledging the talent level is just higher than it was last year, right? Like you add Paul George, you make a bunch of like, you get your Caleb Martin in there. Andre Drummond is he the best backup that Embiid's had? I guess, unless you count like Horford, who was sort of there to play with him. Which
Embiid like also already had Drummond at one point too. So
yeah. So I guess, well, but is this version of Drummond better than that one somehow? I don't know. For me, I go under. I have him at 51, so it's a narrow under. And it's just, I need to see Joel Embiid like be awesome for a full season and be healthy before I believe that it's going to happen. I do think having George and Maxey there sets your floor pretty high, because you might just have more talent than the opponents on nights when Embiid doesn't play, if assuming you're not playing the best teams in the league. So, a narrow range to me, but I can't get the ceiling real high just because of the uncertainty of Embiid.
That's it for me. There's also the uncertainty of Paul George here too, who averages like 20 something absences a year as well. And I think you can trust that they will make a trade to kind of get themselves another like bigger wing or forward defender in there who's not Yabusele, or, asking Paul George or Caleb Martin to do too much. But that's like a February thing or late January thing, probably. It's the Embiid of it all to me. And I think, look, even it feels like the messaging coming out is that they're eyeing a championship. And so we just might see on a night-to-night basis, are they going to manage his minutes, or more importantly, are they going to manage his appearances? And so if you're sitting here telling me, all right, well, Joel Embiid is going to play in fewer than 65 games, how many wins are we supposed to pencil them for? I guess the rebuke would be they won 47 when he played in basically half the year last season, and they're better now at the top. So I think that's a fair criticism. I have them at 51 also as a slight under. And I think, I don't want to say that that's going to be by design on their part. I just don't think that when you look at who their most important players are, I mean, even going down to Kyle Lowry at this point as well. And Caleb Martin's dealt with a bunch of injury stuff. This is going to be a team, maybe counterintuitive because they're coached by Nick Nurse, that they're going to prioritize self-preservation for the postseason.
Yeah, they're right there with the Bucks, right? Even more so, where it's just like, we kind of know what we are. We gotta prioritize the spring and not the winter.
Who's more likely to clear there? Because we both have the Bucks going. I thought I had the Bucks going over, but we both had the Bucks and Sixers going under. Who's more likely to clear there? We had the Bucks at 50.5 and Philly at 52.5. Who's more likely to go over?
I'd say the Sixers.
I think the Bucks.
Okay.
Well, it feels like this, like we've set ourselves up nicely. Like one of these teams is going to win way more games than we're projecting them to.
You think, right? I mean, we're both acknowledging that, like, it's kind of the if they wanna, right? It's like it's. I think the Sixers are like, they're cool with 49 wins if it means that Embiid stayed healthy the whole year. You rested him 20 plus times, like, all that stuff. I think they're totally fine with the 4th seed and a healthy roster. Like they've gone the other way too many times to follow that path again. That takes us to Phoenix. The Suns, Dan, have an over-under of 47.5, coming off a 49 win season. They got point guards this time. Are you going over for that reason?
Am I wrong to think that this is obnoxiously low? I have them at 54 wins. So I went under. I initially had them at 55, 56, and I ended up pulling away. There's definitely there's two players that could get injured and really screw them over in Devin Booker and Kevin Durant. That feels like more than some other teams might have. Mike Budenholzer teams typically win a bunch of regular season games. Even if you expect there to be some defensive regression off the 12th ranked defense in points allowed per possession last year, one, why? They're coached by Budenholzer now, who's not that much, if any, of a defensive downgrade from Mike Budenholzer. But I just think we both have issues with they don't have enough they have too many non-wings, I would frame it. But just the infusion of the offensive organization with Tyus Jones should make the job of Devin Booker and Kevin Durant, specifically, even Bradley Beal, a lot easier. And so when you look at what they were able to do on the offensive end last year, again, in the aggregate, has some different hot stretches, and there are lineups that were obviously in fuego. Phoenix was 9th in points scored per possession last year. That feels more like it'll be closer to 5th or 4th this year. So I think that we're talking about teams that could party crash the consensus top 4 in the West. I have them as a top 4 team in the Western Conference right now. I don't feel great about it because when you look at Dallas, when you look at maybe not Denver, but Dallas and Minnesota specifically, and I have the Thunder first, those are teams that have more depth to their roster, whereas the Suns you get to, all right, Royce O'Neal, fine, but then it's Josh Okogie, and are we playing Bol a bunch, and like who else are we throwing into there? Is Monte Morris going to have a bigger role? But just like they go, I guess 7 players deep that you can trust when you're talking Grayson Allen and Royce O'Neal off the bench with Tyus Jones, Booker, Beal, Durant, and Nurkic. That's not nothing. I mean, that's more than maybe the Nuggets can say for themselves at this point.
Yeah. So I'm over. I got him at 49, and I'm just pricing in the Durant age and injury history. I'm never getting under a 47.5 total with this much talent in Budenholzer, just because that's really what it is to me. That he say what you want. Like also like he's won a championship. So like you can't quite say everything you want about Budenholzer. But he gets regular season results. Like that will be his legacy. Don't you think? Like he maximizes on both ends, like what the scheme should be to win that game that night. And it's worked everywhere. So I just can't, I can't say 47 to go under. You have to say the Suns are going to win 47 games. Like that's another case where it would just be injury. Like that's how you get under. And
because they won 49 last year, Grant, and added a starter.
Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's, and like, look, Durant's someone that you might suspect will have an injury or fall off. And Booker has not been the healthiest guy in the world over his career. But man, like I'm not up there with you in the 50s. I could never deny that they have that upside. Like, yeah, they could win 58. Like, why? The talent's there. Like, that's just not. To me, I'm kind of like hedging a little bit with 49. Man, Portland, here we go. The Blazers have an over/under of 21.5. We recently said on a podcast that they could win the West if they wanted to because they're so talented. They only won 21. Did we say that? Maybe not quite that much. They won 21 a year ago. What do you think? Over, under, push?
We both have them over. I spoiled it for screen on YouTube already. Shaedon Sharpe already injured. Robert Williams III already injured. Okay, I get it. If you think they're going to trade a bunch of guys, but this is just, they won 21 last year and you're giving them an extra half win bump. What is Scoot Henderson not going to get any better? And that was with Shaedon Sharpe playing in, 33 games or something. If you think that they're going to pivot all the way into, Jeremy Grant is traded, Denny Avdia is maybe being shut down at some point this season. Sure. But this team stretches 2 NBA players or real prospects deep, at least at every single spot. And it's just like, I know the West is tough and that you have to pull the wins from somewhere, but like they won 21 last year and you can't, why are they going to be worse? What is the reason they're going to be worse? That they decide to be worse?
The argument you'd make is that they really skew towards we're going to play Scoot and Sharpe when he's healthy. And maybe when this is how they just play Shaedon Sharpe, even though he only has one good shoulder. That would probably be how you get under. But if it's just like, we're only playing the young guys. We've traded all, but like, that's not going to happen, on November 1st. They're not going to just jettison all the old guys. Like, you're going to play Jeremy Grant and Robert Williams and DeAndre Ayton. And like, I mean, I don't know where you put the guys like Kamara in there. Like, I mean, he's a helpful player now, but he's also young enough to be like so it's too low. I'm over. I'm at 25. You're at, what are you at? 24. Like, if they, being hyperbolic earlier, but like if they wanted to, there's like 34, 35 wins in this team, right? Like, if depending on what they want to do.
Putting them at 24, 25 is an acknowledgement that they're going to actively decide not to win more games, is how I feel.
I think that's right. Yeah. Yeah.
So to be this low, and is there anyone that you could say, oh, they're injured, there's no way this team gets to 22 victories? There's literally no one on the roster you could say that about right now. And that's no offense to Scoot, but like, he was damaging for a huge part of last year. And we saw him kind of turn the corner to close the season anyway.
Right. And that just means, okay, so Simons and Denny Avdia and Jeremy Grant handle the ball more. Like, okay, like that's not hurtful. Like, that's helpful. So yeah, I don't see, maybe this is just probably they're guaranteed to win like 12 games now. Cause it's like, I don't understand how they win 21 or fewer games. I don't see it.
I guess if you look at it and say, even at full strength, you still consider them no better than the 14th best team in the West. And that's their pathway to winning 21 games or fewer.
Yeah, that's true. They could be a better team and just get their asses kicked because there's 12, everybody else in the West is good. But I just,
if we're being honest, can we be prepared to guarantee that the San Antonio Spurs are going to be better than the Blazers?
Can't guarantee it. Like,
right.
I mean, that we're both predicting that, but it's like, it's not stunning if those things flip. Not at all.
Oh, this next team is your team, Grant. The Sacramento Kings.
All right. Their number's 46.5. Added DeMar DeRozan. We universally agree that is a talent upgrade. What did they win last year? 46. So, I mean, the Vegas doesn't think they're a heck of a lot better. What do you think?
I went over, but I went to 47. It's not like this was an easy over for me because I want to respect that. I think, look, Malik Monk missed time to close the year. I think Kevin Huerter, whether they trade him or keep him, should have a better season than he's been struggling basically since the 2023 playoffs.
Yeah.
It feels like. So if he's healthy, Keegan Murray's going to continue to get better. I think he's already a fantastic defender. So if you're going to say that they got better, for them to win fewer games, I think you have to go beyond. You have to have inherent doubts about the DeRozan addition working. And you have to believe that there's a chance it could be actively hurtful. It can't just be, oh, the West is better. Right. Like you added DeMar DeRozan, who is close to all. I get the thing of just like, oh, their biggest addition was this 35-year-old player. Maybe we're assigning too much value to it, but he's not going to be all of a sudden like the 9th best player on the roster, even if he's your 3rd best player, which frankly, that's what you want. If the Kings had their druthers, they probably want him to be their 4th best player by the end of the season behind Keegan Murray, Domas Sabonis. People get mad when I call him Domas Sabonis. Isn't that what people call him, by the way?
Yeah,
Domantas Sabonis, if you prefer to hear that. And De'Aaron Fox.
Mad about that.
So I don't know what I am concerned about the team's defense, despite I know I call them out all the time, but there's way too many Kings fans that just think that DeMar DeRozan is better than Harrison Barnes for them on defense. I think with Keon Ellis, Keegan Murray, that you can get to some core lineups, and if Devin Carter gets healthy, that you can get to some core lineups, and De'Aaron Fox even, where the defense is passable. I like what this sort of indicates for their offense, that I think there's going to be a return to last year. The Kings were okay on offense. I think now they have the tools to be great and transcendent again on offense. And to me, I do think there's a lower floor here than maybe a lot of Kings fans would like to admit, but I'm just looking at it like every one of their most important players are basically Iron Men at this point. And so this just feels like, I don't know if they have the high upside. I guess if you told me everyone's healthy and nothing goes wrong, I'd probably still keep them under 51 victories. But I don't think that they have a very low floor either, which bodes super well for them.
I feel like this is one of the narrowest ranges. It's like, I don't see them being below 43 and I don't see 50. So I ended up at 46, which is an under. I mean, one fewer win than you. In the end, that feels right to me because it sort of reflects ultimately what my questions have been since they made the DeRozan trade, which is like, yes, more talent, but I don't think you can be someone that ever thinks about fit mattering and be sure that like this is a better product overall. Just because there are questions about sharing the ball, there are definitely defensive questions. And I don't think it's realistic to say I know that DeMar DeRozan at this age will be as good as he was last year, because we're like at the point where like maybe it's just gone. I don't know. I don't know what percentage chance that is, but just having them also be, they won 46. I'm picking them for 46. I think that just feels right with sort of how I view what they've done over the offseason. So yeah, like I got them one win above the Warriors. So I guess you can't call me a total homer and Kings hater for that reason.
The other thing, when it comes to the defense, I think one of the biggest rebuttals would be they were top 5 or top 7 when Keon Ellis was starting. That was a quarter of the season, basically, and the latter quarter of the season when there's all sorts of noise involved. And so could the Kings be competent defensively over the course of an entire season? Sure, but we don't just get to isolate these stretches when it's most convenient for our narratives, unless you're you and I, because the points we're making then are 100% accurate and salient, and that's what we're going to do. I said that they don't have a very low floor, but I could see this team being one where it's not because of injuries, but because the fits are so much less clean or squeaky clean than they were thinking, that they need to reorient the roster kind of midseason, and that hurts them. I'm still going over. I think that if they're not going to make any changes, even if it's not perfect, their floor still is pretty high, but it probably could be where you said it feels like it might be 43 wins. There's probably a chance to me that it's even lower than that, but still, that might be like 41 or something.
Who do you think they cannot lose? Like talking about like
De'Aaron Fox I really think it would be a disaster for them if De'Aaron Fox misses time. And we even saw it last year. The offense struggled when he was, I think he had a sprained ankle or whatever it was.
I think I agree, and I think he's just their best player. But like, you have Malik Monk and DeMar DeRozan. Like, if we're gonna make, I'm devil's advocating, because I do think he's the guy they can't lose, and I do think that their sort of skill set balance is wonky. But like, Monk and DeRozan are both guys that just create offense. So you would think like, oh yeah, well, we could lose but then I don't know what the answer is, because it can't be. Maybe it's Sabonis, I guess, because then you're just playing Alex Len or Trey Lyles or but like, then you might be able to space. I don't know. It's a hard question. And usually when we have a hard time answering it, it means like, wow, this team's like going to be really good because they can sort of withstand an injury to the guy we think's their best player. It probably is Fox, though. He's just kind of, to me, like a level above everyone else they have. Speaking of a level above, height-wise.
What a transition. That's a podcast pro right there.
The San Antonio Spurs, led by some French guy, have an over-under of 35.5. Why isn't this 75.5, Dan?
I honestly don't know. I went over. I have them for 77 wins. I have them under, and it kind of kills me. We all know the numbers of when Devin Vassell and Wemby and Trey Jones played together, and now you get to throw Chris Paul in there instead of Trey Jones, and you get 48 or 40-plus minutes of competent point guard play. Devin Vassell's already injured, and just the surrounding talent is still, in general, not there yet. Like, how much Harrison Barnes should help them, but where's Jeremy Sohan's place on this team right now? And so if you're going to play him with Chris Paul, and then Wemby's going to be like, you don't have any real high volume 3-point shooters on this team. So there's a chance that the offense still struggles. The other thing here is that Chris Paul is 39. Are we just going to trust he's going to come in and be transformative? That's not so Wemby is great through him, as you say. All things are possible. I understand why it's this high. There's a chance they might be so good defensively that, okay, yeah, they clearly, it's not outside the realm of possibility that they're just in the play-in mix. I just have a tough time reconciling. They've made it clear that they're still in the build phase of the rebuild. And it's not like they're ready to progress much further. I don't see them, even if they're slightly better than expected, are they going to make a trade that helps them win games? No, they're probably going to continue to be like, well, we have to see what we have in Jeremy Sohan. And I'm assuming they're going to spend heavy minutes, heavy reps developing Stefan Castle at the NBA club level. And so that's another guy who might potentially shrink your spacing in the half court. This team should be better. They won 22 last year. So I have them at 35 wins. That's a 13 win improvement. And if you're saying the players they've added are 39-year-old Chris Paul, Harrison Barnes, and a rookie in Stefan Castle as their primary additions, I think that's still adequately enough accounts for, Wemby's just ridiculous.
Yeah. I feel like a fraud because I'm also under here at 35. So we've got matching cowardly narrow unders here. It's just like, okay, so Wemby makes a leap, right? We're adding 13 wins to their total from last year. And so like I do think if he is who we think he is, then we probably should acknowledge that like 45 wins is possible, right? Like it's just that could happen if he does, like, if he hits the high end of our typically outlandish projections. But like 30 is also in play because of the things you mentioned. Like they're going to give minutes to young guys. I don't think you can count on Chris Paul to play a full season. Like there is, sorry, but like there is actually some downside from this over under. I think we should probably like respect a little bit. But I mean, we're adding a ton to their total, so I don't feel too bad about it. But I'm with you in the under.
The thing I go back and forth on is that, so like if we believe that he's generational in the vein of LeBron James and Luka Doncic, and like Luka Doncic's team as a sophomore, the Mavericks ends up finishing, I think it was 9 games over 500 in his second season. And then you're LeBron, who I think this is a more accurate view of where Wemby is, because Kristaps Porzingis did play in a majority of Dallas's games in 2019, 2020. The second best player on that LeBron James team in Cleveland as a sophomore was, I guess, Ilgauskas, if not Drew Gooden or Jeff McGinnis. And so the second best player on San Antonio, I would say, is Devin Vassell. If he's healthy, that LeBron James team in the East won 42 games.
Yeah.
And so the fact that Wemby, I would say, doesn't have a traditional co-star, someone who I guess I would put, I'm very high on Vassell, so I'd put him on the same level as Kristaps, but just like, okay, now you get into the third best player of it all. Let's use the Mavericks as an analog. They were actually 11 games over 500 when Luka was a sophomore in a shortened season, no less. Like you don't have enough of the Dorian Finney-Smiths or the Tim Hardaway Jr. shooting 40% from 3 on an absurd amount of volume. That was one of Maxi Kleber's best and most available seasons, by the way. So it's really tough for me. I want to put them higher. And if he is as good as we think he is, 45 is not outside their own possibility, but LeBron James won 42 games in the East as a sophomore. How many are you going to pencil in Wemby for with this version of the Spurs in this iteration of the West?
Yeah, I think that's the way to look at it. It's like he can still make a leap and land right where we got it, right? Like it's not like us saying 35 wins means he's going to be about the same. Like, no, he's going to be way better. I think that's the expectation, but so will the Spurs.
There's a chance he's way better and they win 30.
Sure. Right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, friggin' Vassell, can Devin Vassell make it through a season, please? Can we see the full year from this guy?
He's really my whole like my Chris Middleton arc for him. Like he's really trying to stick to it, but like get there. Like Chris Middleton was more durable early on. Maybe he's getting the injuries out.
He's doing it backwards. Yeah. He's got it wrong.
Our next team is the Toronto Raptors, 29.5. I was going to have them way over until Jakob Poeltl said they don't give a shit about winning basketball games, and it made people mad. No, he didn't say that. He said they're not attacking the championship, which is just, I appreciated it. Yeah. I still have them over, which I feel like you could talk me into them being under. I have them at 33 wins, mostly because I believe in their top end talent. And one of those top end talents, to be honest, really isn't Jakob Poeltl. It's Scotty Barnes, Emmanuel Quickley. I like what RJ has done with them. And I really do like Grady Dick too. Like, I think he showed a lot. And then even in his preseason game, he's hitting a lot of shots off the bounce. No Emmanuel Quickley, no Scotty Barnes. He's making stuff happen off the bounce. After that, though, I know Raptors fans were smitten with what Jamal Shed has done in, again, very brief. What are they, a game into the preseason at this point? I've seen the defensive sequences from him. This shit gets rough after the projected starting 5. And Bruce Brown is injured. And I mean, I know there's Emmanuel Quickley, RJ Barrett, Scotty Barnes, Jakob Poeltl, I think is very clearly your 4 best players. After that, I probably think Grady Dick will be their 5th best player.
And that's not a great place to be because nobody's real sure about that either. Like, I agree with you, but like that illustrates your point. It's like we're talking about a 5th starter and we're already at like, ooh, I don't know.
And what's the answer that would make you feel comfortable? If I said it was Bruce Brown, Agbaji, Kelly Olynyk, none of those names are going to make you feel comfortable. And it just gets even worse once you get beyond that. Bruce Brown's injured. It's all right. Like Jacoby Walter's banged up right now. Like what is he going to end up being for them? How much are they going to be invested in development? That made it made it harder to kind of figure out a win total. I could see their floor being a lot lower because they decide it needs to be a lot lower, where if they're just not great, wouldn't shock me if they tried to trade RJ Barrett and Emmanuel quickly. The only person that's untouchable on this team is Scotty Barnes.
Yeah.
So I went over at 33. I don't know that I feel great about it though.
No, I'm in locks. I got them over at 32. I mean, like they won 25 last year. I can't. If Barnes plays at or above the level he did last year, and quickly is, okay, he's actually a like, 15th or better starting point guard in the league. Like, I don't know that we know that at all yet, but if he does that, then like we're getting to 30. I think 29.5 is pretty low. They could steer into it, but even like that hypothetical does involve like, are you really going to trade quickly just after you extended him? I guess like if that number's palatable for other teams, sure. And even Pirtle, like, he's not their best player by any stretch, but like that's a serviceable starting NBA center who's like actually helpful to you on both ends. I think that sets the floor above 30. So I don't love it, and I acknowledge they could go the other way, but I think the low 30s is pretty doable for them.
I don't know what this team is going to be on defense too, because Pirtle's rim protection has slipped over the past couple seasons, and just after him, like it's Kelly Olynyk's not going to be an upgrade.
Chris Boucher, get in
That's
there.
right. Chris Boucher. Oh, by the way, there you go. He's their fifth best player. Fifth best player. I can't believe we didn't mention him, but yeah, this team is, you could talk me into this. Doesn't this feel like this has, we've talked a lot about sort of the finite, the narrower outcomes. Doesn't this feel like this has a wider range of outcomes where if I told you they won 38, 39, would it really, or even 500, would that shock you?
How do they get there? Because I've been trying to think
They're
about
healthy. They're healthy. Their top five is killing it. You get progression from Grady Dick, maybe Jamal Shed or Jacoby Walter can contribute right away. I mean, when you look at, if everyone's healthy, let's spell out what an NBA level rotation would be in no particular order. You have IQ, Barrett, Scotty Barnes, Jakob Pertl, Grady Dick, Bruce Brown, Kelly Olynyk, Chris Boucher. That's 8 like NBA players. And so if you hit on one of the wings or perimeter players where it's, can Shed average any minute or play any minutes, or can Walter, does Akbaji maybe come along? I don't know.
I don't think they can be above 500, but I do see the high 30s get like that. Yeah. I mean, I got them at 32. You're at 33. Like, yeah, they could just have good clutch luck and maybe get, up to the 37, 38 range. So I could see that, but I don't see like the 42, 43, but yeah, a good point taken.
They can make a trade. They have all these guys and they're like second and third contracts already. They might just say, hey,
that's true. It's not like they're cheap. They're not like a stripped down, cheap, young team. It's like Barnes and Quickly got they're paid. Like they're not, they're expensive to some extent. That takes us to the Utah Jazz. Dan, over under 28.5. This is a steer into the skid too late team habitually the last 2 years. That is they're just a weird team to evaluate because you don't really know what they're going to do trade wise. So where are you on that 28.5?
I'm going under, and I went comfortably under because I don't think they're going to let what's happened the past 2 years happen again. I have them at 20 wins, which would make them my worst team in the Western Conference. I understand that they probably should have hired a worse coach, like to start off this rebuild, because Will Hardy's probably too good. Let's just look at their rotation right now. I get like Colin Sexton, Jordan Clarkson, Larry Markin, John Collins, Walker Kessler are probably their 5 best players. I don't know if that's what they would actually start games with this year, but like after that, how many minutes are you going to play? Like Colin Sexton, Jordan Clarkson, John Collins specifically, you don't have a ton of long-term equity invested in them. You're trying to trade Walker Kessler. Apparently this just feels like we're going to have a lot of games where it's, did Johnny Juzang leave the team in shot attempts or something? I think there's going to be a lot of load management here. I think there's eventually going to be trades. There's no way that all 4 of Walker Kessler, John Collins, Colin Sexton, and Jordan Clarkson finish the season on this team. And if they do, I guarantee you none of them finish it in the rotation because they'll be shut down. So I think the Jazz are going to get out in front of this. I know you predicted that they might make a win now trade. So do you have them winning like 49 or 52 games?
61. No. So like they won 31 last year. And me being under, which I am at 22, is a statement that I'm not comfortable with because they haven't done this effectively, is that they're going to do this on purpose. I think finally, that was my hot take. They'll make a win now. I think the opportunity's there. I feel like they should believe they have missed like lottery tickets because of Wemby and because, not so much this past season, but like you can't do it 3 times in a row. You can't be, 12-14 and then be like, uh-oh, we got, that you can't do it 3 times in a row. So this will be a decision on their part. And I do think the Markkanen security, like, at least as far as like his perspective, it's easier now because you can tell him like, hey man, like you got your money. Here's the plan. Like, I presume that was discussed like while they were negotiating that extension of like, this is probably what it's going to look like. What are your thoughts? Do you want to be traded? And it seems like the answer was no. Now, you could make the case that like what they told him was we're going to try to win. And that's why he resigned. I mean, that's just as plausible, but I just, it's like we throw around franchise malpractice all the time. You can't half-ass tank 3 years in a row. You can't do it. I think this has to be the one where they really do it on purpose.
And I also, what is their ceiling if they are going for it? I know they're well coached, but like part of the mid-season reshufflings has been there is less talent, like bankable talent on this roster. And so unless you think that Keontae George and Taylor Hendricks are going to really make leaps this year, which possible, and then that Cody Williams is going to be good right out of the gate, is their ceiling much higher than like how many they won last 31, 32 games?
No, I think like absolute ceiling, everything breaks right. They don't give Cody Williams and Keontae George and Taylor Hendricks a ton of minutes. They actually play these older guys like 37. Like it's just every break goes their way. But like the flip side of that is they have real cover from like a fan standpoint of like, hey, you want to see George play with like, I don't know, Isaiah Collier and Williams and Kessler and Hendricks? Like, bang, we'll throw them out there. Those guys as a starting unit are going to get smoked by like 15 points per 100, but like the fans will dig it. You can sell that now. So you can, I don't know what you do with Markkanen. I guess you just like bubble wrap him for a year, but you can definitely like get away with it if you're Utah, because you do have young players that will not help you win that fans want to see.
What's more likely if the Jazz are once again at over 500 midway at the midway point of the season, which is the past 2 years they've had a record above 500 at different points more than halfway through? Is Will Hardy in the coach of the year discussion or just getting fired at that point?
I mean, both. You can definitely get fired. Ask Dwayne Casey. You can get fired after winning coach of the year. That's the hard part
coach of the year after getting fired though. Like they fire him 50 games in, and it's, I don't know, man. They were 49. They were 49-1 at that point. Like,
right, yeah, and then they didn't win the rest of the year because the next guy, the interim coach, is like, I can fix this for you.
Whoa, we went back to the start of this thing, but that's not what we're here for. Our final team, as always, in the alphabet, at least that's what rumor has it, is the Washington Wizards, which their over-under grant is not too high. It's at 20.5. Where did you end up with them?
I can't remember because I don't see them. I got to go all the way up to the east. Okay, so this is a team that can be like deliberately just awful if they really want to, right? Like they have the ability to put lineups on the floor that have no chance, like defensively in particular. And I think everything they've done, like if you trade Danny Avdija on that contract for a pick and an even younger player, like I think the signal is pretty clear about what the objective is here. So 20.5, like I guess that presumes you never trade Malcolm Brogdon and Kyle Kuzma and like anybody else that could be an average or better NBA player on this roster. I don't see that as likely given what they did with Avdija. So I got him at 15 wins. He said ? Yeah, 15. I had him a little higher just because at the extremes, like I didn't go into the mid to low teens until I had to. But like, find me a team that is going to start the season like at a bigger disadvantage from a talent and experience standpoint than this one. Like this is, and it's not a revelation. This is the team everyone expects to be the worst in the league.
Yeah, and I have them under as well, except I went to 13. I don't think you're giving Will Dawkins and Michael Winger enough credit. My whole thing is there another team where what's the other team where you say, well, even if they make no moves, they're still going to be way under this total? Because I think a lot of people say, yeah, they'll probably trade Kyle Kuzma and Jonas Valanciunas and Malcolm Brogdon. We probably thought the same thing last year about Kyle Kuzma and Tyus Jones, both of whom finished the season. And I know they did go on and move Daniel Gafford. I get it. But just like they're playing Alex Sarr to begin the year, it seems like at the 4. I don't like, what is that going to do? This feels like they should be the worst team, like the worst defensive team in league history as built. as currently built. And so the reason I went so low is I actually do think that they will trade some of the veterans and like ensure that Brian Keefe doesn't have those clubs in his bag later on in the year. But even if they don't, 16. But I just like, what is this team's ceiling doesn't even feel like everyone's healthy. No one gets traded. This team's ceiling doesn't even feel like it's 21.
Right. Because you'd say like, the defense, I think the defense is like, if they're not the worst defense in the league, I want to know who is. So, but like, okay, offensively, all right, Jordan Poole gets better and like Koulibaly takes a step and Kuzma's there all year. Valanciunas gives you a post-up option. Like, even with all that, it's like, okay, so they're the 25th best offense. Like I just, that which is what they were last year, 29th on defense. Good job, Jazz being 30th somehow inexplicably. I mean, the ceiling is what? Like the ceiling might be the over under. Like the ceiling might be 20. I just like, I don't know how you do better than that with this roster and with the directive clearly from the top of like, not trying to win. We're going to like, so how about this? Which of Sarr, Carrington, and Koulibaly will rank outside the top 5 in minutes played on the team this year?
Probably Sarr. I feel like he'll be in a crap ton of foul trouble.
You're right. Okay, great. So he'll actually hurt the team a bunch and then be out. So he'll get his damage done in a short burst, get the opponent over the limit and sit. I know they're going to play these guys and they're going to just do damage like from the jump. And
I know that we're kind of trolling. To me, the Wizards are doing the right thing. Like I love I want to make that clear. I'm going to be mad if they hit the over. I think that'll be bad for their future, probably. Well, it says a lot that they could hit the over. And theoretically, I know the Pistons won 14. All right, they're not going to hit the over and have the worst record in the league, but like they could.
Yeah. I mean, is there another team that wants fewer wins than Washington? Like that has acted, you know what I mean? Like no. I think
the Jazz could talk themselves into needing to be that team.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. But they're not positioned to do it. I mean, they got to do way more work to get that bad.
If we're being honest, there is probably a team that should want it just as badly. Chicago.
Well, what Chicago wants and what's good for it have often diverged.
Here's a good place to wrap on the Wizards before we just go into a quick recap. What's more likely? The Wizards win. The Wizards do not finish with a bottom 3 record, or the Clippers finish with the worst record, the bottom 2 record. What's more likely? Clippers with bottom 2 or the Wizards finishing outside the bottom 4?
Oh, so like the Wizards are not one of the 3 worst teams.
Correct.
I don't know how that happens. I think the Wizards just have to be. So I guess my answer has to be the Clippers, because I just can't fathom how the Wizards are not one of the 3 worst records.
I think it would just be like shit goes sideways in Detroit and Charlotte and Chicago, right?
Yeah.
And they're all just, that's like I'd take the one that I would take that the Wizards finished like 4th or 5th with the 4th or 5th worst record. But the point stands that this is the team that I think is and by the way, that counts as a direction. And so It's not one of these teams that are going to try and pivot into a separate direction in the middle of the year. So I fave it. Good job, Wizards. We should recap here a little bit. As of right now, I have Boston finishing first in the East, the Knicks at 2 with 53 wins, the Cavaliers at 3 with 52, Philly at 4 with 51, the Bucks at 5 with 50, the Pacers at 6 with 48, the Magic at 7th with 47, the Heat in 8th with 46, and then the Hawks are in 9th at 36, the Raptors are in 10th at 33, and then my bottom 5 teams in order are Charlotte at 11th, Detroit at 12th, Chicago at 13th, Brooklyn at 14th, and the Wizards at 15th. By the way, we didn't mention the Nets, but they're probably the team that should actually want to be worse even more than the Wizards. We didn't even.
Well, at least equally. I don't know if you can want more. All right. So stop me if I screw this up, because I just sorted Z to A here. So my East standings go Boston with 56 wins. That's your number 1 seed. Cleveland is 2 at 53. The Knicks are 3rd at 52 wins, followed by the Sixers at 51. So there's your top 4. Got the Bucks as the 5th seed, 49 wins. The Pacers check in at 47. The Magic are your 6th seed, if I've counted correctly. Maybe 7th, can't remember now. 46 wins, followed by the Heat at 45. Then all the way down. That's a huge drop from 45.
I didn't even realize so we both have the Heat at 8, right?
Yeah. And then
I have
all the
the
way
Hawks
down to
at 9,
Atlanta at
10
36.
wins fewer. Is that
Yeah.
what you have?
Yes. 36 for Atlanta there.
Wow.
Then we go to the Raptors 32, Pistons 29, Bulls 26, Nets 17, Wizards 15. A couple big chasms there from like your playoff to your play-in to your just absolute dregs down there. In the West, OKC is my number 1 seed at 59 wins, followed by the Wolves. That's number 2 at 54. My 3rd seed is the Nuggets at 52. Man, these are so like densely bunched. There's no way it actually shakes out like this. The Mavs are the 4th seed for me at 51, followed by the Suns. That's your 5th seed at 49. The Grizzlies are 6th at 47 wins. The Pelicans are 7th at 47. The Kings are your 8th seed at 46. Oh, I got the Pelicans and Kings at 46. Tiebreakers going to come in there for that play-in round. The Warriors are next in the West at 45. The Rockets 43. Lakers, I guess I have out of the play-in at 42. Tough break. Spurs, big drop there down to 35 wins. The Clippers at 30. And then I've got Portland 25, Utah 22, bringing up the rear in the West.
Still can't believe you only had the Thunder under 60 wins. That just feels egregious. So my West, this is actually the drop off at the top. OKC at 65 wins, down to Phoenix at number 2 at 54. So I have the Thunder being I have the Thunder being 11 games better than second place in the West and 8 games better than anybody else in the league, apparently.
I'm not going to fight you.
The Wolves at 3 with 53, the Mavs at 4 with 53, the whatever tiebreaker there. Denver 5th at 52. It feels weird having Denver in 5th. I'm not going to lie. The Pels at 6th with 48. The Kings at 7 with 47. The Grizzlies at 8 with 44. The Lakers at 9. The Lakers and Rockets 9th and 10th at 43 wins apiece. With the Warriors that are 11th with 43 wins apiece. The Spurs are 12th with 35. I have the Clippers 13th at 31. The Blazers 14th at 24, and the Jazz dead last with 20. That little gaggle right there, where I have Memphis, Los Angeles, Houston, and Golden State. And we're talking about seeds 8 through 11, the 44 to 43. If it's that close, that would make the play-in race super fun in the Western Conference this year.
I think that's going to happen. The just glut in that middle of the West is unavoidable.
One of my bigger takeaways would be, or my bigger questions just before we wrap up. So do we think that one of the Lakers or the Warriors is going to end up missing the play-in? We each had one of them out.
So the only way that doesn't happen, yes, is the answer, is like the Spurs make that leap or the Clippers hang. Well, if the Clippers hang in, then maybe they both miss it, but I don't think we view that as likely, right? So is it just the Spurs or the Rockets? Like one of them gets in, because Memphis, we think, is definitely going to bump somebody. I think that you just run out of room. Unless you think maybe the Pelicans slip out. I don't know. Yeah, that's where we are.
It feels like, forget about the order, but it feels like OKC, Phoenix, Minnesota, Dallas, Denver, New Orleans, Sacramento, and Memphis give you like a very clear-cut top 8.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's okay. So that leaves 2 spots for the play-in. And I would assume the primary contenders are going to be, I mean, you could throw the Clippers in there, but Clippers, Spurs, Warriors, Rockets, Lakers. So like for even like it's not outside the realm of possibility that both of them end up missing the play-in.
Right. If Rockets and Spurs get in, then that's it.
Or even if the Clippers, maybe like Kawhi Leonard's just all of a sudden healthy and last the year and we're wrong there, but fascinating exercise. We're going to be so wrong. Don't forget, before you take us out of here to join our Discord so you could be part of the over-under competition that we will be running.
Yeah, it's easy pickings too. We're very beatable if history is any guide for this exercise. So please get in there, get your over-unders, your win totals in there, so we can compare notes at the end of the year, and we can both Dan and I can share in the shame, I guess, but also the joy of having so many people participate in this exercise. Thanks everybody for listening, for watching. As always, as Dan said, join the Discord for reasons to participate in this exercise and others. If you have not done so already, rate, review, subscribe, comment on YouTube, check out the shorts that Dan so meticulously curates, fashions. It's art. It's art. If you have never seen art, that's what it looks like. Tell your friends, tell your enemies. Close as usual. Shouts. Frank. Apologies. Jarrett.